Hello everyone, and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Thursday, January 26th, and I hope you're all having a wonderful day so far. I'm your host, William Willis. In today's show, we're going to bring you some fantastic interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'm going to start off with our Techstrong News Recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then we'll head over to Allen, where he sits down with Stephen Chung, president at Delphix, to talk about how test data management ensures compliance with data privacy regulations. Allen will then speak to Mackenzie Jackson, developer advocate at GitGuardian, to discuss the major cause of breaches in 2022, look back at the biggest breaches, and discuss how to safeguard against them. We will then air an episode of Techstrong Women. In this episode, Tracy and Jody sit down with Sofia Palamarchuk, co-founder and CEO of Aptim. Then we go to AWS reInvent 2022, where Mitch met with Manoj Nair, Chief Product Officer of Sneak, to talk about how Sneak is leading the charge for developer security and delivering cyber resilience by embedding security through the development process. Also at AWS reInvent, Mitch met with Cenk Özdemir, Cloud and Digital Leader at PwC, to talk about the state of cloud industry and how companies are leveraging cloud to unlock business priorities. Then we go to Bonnie, where she speaks with Damian Bowie, Energy Sector Lead at AWS, and Olin Lagon, co-founder and CTO at Shifted Energy, to discuss their organization's collaborative efforts to address the climate crisis. Bonnie will then meet with climate tech entrepreneur Oliver Bolton to discuss earthly automated investment and visualization tools that enable businesses to showcase their climate journeys. Then we go back to AWS reInvent, where Mike Vizard met with Adam Wilson, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Designer Cloud at Alteryx, to discuss how Alteryx is bringing scalability and accessibility to cloud analytics with Alteryx Analytics Cloud. We will then wrap up this broadcast with 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first episode, Mike interviews Kapil Raina, Vice President of Zero Trust Marketing and Identity Protection Evangelist for CrowdStrike, as Kapil explains how cyber attacks against Microsoft Active Directory are evolving. Then, Mike interviews Greg Bach, Chief of Research and Development for ShowPro, as Greg explains why organizations need to protect data stored in their Jira project management applications from Atlassian to keep application development on track. And that's what we have coming up for you in this episode of Techstrong TV. So without further ado, let's get the show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for January 26th. First up, the United States Justice Department and several states have brought a legal action against Google, accusing the company of using its market position in digital advertising to harm competitors. The antitrust lawsuit was filed in a federal court in Alexandria, Virginia, and accuses Google of unlawfully monopolizing the online advertising industry by excluding competitors, including through its 2008 purchase of DoubleClick. This being said, this is not the first time legal action has been taken against Google by the Justice Department, with the last time being back in December of 2020 over the exact same issues. So we have to see how this all plays out. Next, Tapbots, the developers behind the popular third-party Twitter app, Tweetbot, has announced the release of its Mastodon client app, Ivory. The app aims to fill the void left by Twitter by revoking the API access earlier this month. While the app is currently in early access, Tapbots has stated that it uses a similar interface as Tweetbot, but now embraces the open-source platform Mastodon. Zooming out, Mastodon has gained traction in recent months as users and developers began looking for alternatives to Twitter. As of the beginning of 2023, Mastodon has grown to 2.5 million monthly active users across 8,600 different servers. In other news, GoTo, the parent company of LastPass, has confirmed that cybercriminals have stolen encrypted backups of its customers during its most recent breach. The breach, which first was reported on November 30th, involved an unauthorized party gaining access to some customers' information stored in a third-party cloud service. However, GoTo now stated that the cyber attack impacted several other products, including Central, Join Me, Hamachi, and Remotely Anywhere. GoTo also confirmed that the intruders stole customers' encrypted backups, which may include account usernames, passwords, and a portion of multi-factor authentication settings. GoTo has said that the company is contacting the affected customers directly and is advising those who are impacted to reset passwords and reauthorize multi-factor authentication. Next up, Amazon has announced the launch of a new service called RX Pass, aimed at expanding its reach in the prescription drugs market. The service, which is available to US Prime users, allows customers to pay a $5 monthly fee to get up to 80 generic versions of medications that they need. Zooming out, this is a big move for Amazon as it tries to get a bigger foothold into the healthcare and medtech markets, as it competes with several competitors, such as Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs. Amazon has been trying to expand in healthcare for years since its purchase of PillPack back in 2018. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a survey showing some of the security challenges of API sprawl. With more and more organizations adopting hybrid technologies, many of these organizations are beginning to worry about API sprawl. This article looks at some of the pressing security challenges as well as the risks of sprawl. To learn more, go to securityboulevard.com. On Container Journal, we have an article looking at a report showing how organizations are struggling with Kubernetes management. The report, which analyzed more than 150,000 workloads running in Kubernetes clusters, found that organizations are not following the best practices for managing cloud-native application environments. What's even scarier is that only 10% of organizations are able to lock down their workloads. To learn more, go to containerjournal.com. Finally, on DevOps.com, we have an article looking at a survey conducted by Dynatrace that looks at the state of DevOps in the enterprise. Over 1,300 CIOs and DevOps managers were surveyed, and from the results, over 75% said that they deploy software updates every 12 hours. Additionally, 90% said that the pace of digital transformation within their organizations have accelerated in the past 12 months. To learn more, go to DevOps.com. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. You know, I was really happy when I saw this gentleman on our schedule because we haven't had anyone from Delphix here on Techstrong TV in a while. And, you know, 8 years of doing DevOps, Delphix has been a company that I think we've covered from day one. And it's good to have someone from Delphix back. I want to introduce you to Stephen Chung of Delphix. Stephen, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you for having me this morning.
It's a pleasure. So, Stephen, I didn't say your title. I was going to kind of leave it to you. Why don't we start off with this? Why don't you give people a little background on who Stephen Chung is? And then, if you don't mind, let's talk about, just level set on who Delphix is, what you guys do. I know over the years, right, the mission has continued to grow. But, it'd be good to bring the audience up to date.
Great, yes. Yeah, Stephen Chung, I'm the president at Delphix. I run our go-to-market operations, been with the company for 3 years. And prior to Delphix, I was chief revenue officer at a startup called PagerDuty. So I know there's some people in the development community. So I came from the DevOps toolchain space, helped take that company from Series B through our IPO at the New York Stock Exchange in April 2019. And prior to that, had done stints at companies like Salesforce and Symantec and other infrastructure and application software companies. So been in the enterprise B2B software world for 25 years. So, why Delphix? And then I'll kind of get on to who Delphix is for those who may not be familiar. But Delphix was fascinating to me because this was a late stage startup that really belongs in the DevOps tool chain space that no one's ever heard of before. And so if you're a developer or you come from sort of that technical background of building applications, you think about all the innovation that's been invested in helping to automate application software development. So you have tools like Splunk, you have tools like PagerDuty, you have an entire DevOps tool chain out there to help developers be more productive and build sort of this self-service model that the Amazons of the world have been developing over the last 10 years. However, the long pole on the tent that we often see is data, right? So while we've automated a lot of this other stuff, monitoring, productivity, GitHub, GitLab, do all the stuff on the application software development, you're still stuck queued by data, right? Data sitting in silos, and you have to create a ticket, ask your DBAs to give you data to test to complete your job. And so even though so much of the application development lifecycle is moving really quickly, you're kind of constrained by data. So data is like, if you're running a bakery, the analogy I would use is data is kind of like the oven. You can keep putting more chefs in the kitchen, but if you only have one oven, everybody's waiting for that one oven. So what we're saying is, instead of one oven, what if you could have unlimited number of ovens? We can virtualize all the databases within the enterprise, no matter what they are, modern, old, in between, and be able to serve that up and automate the flow of that data to developers so that they have it on demand. So instead of writing a ticket and having to ask for data that will be there 3 weeks later to be able to complete your job, test it, put it into production, why don't we give it to you on demand so you can go do it whenever you're ready? That's one. The other method would be, how do I fully automate it into a CI/CD pipeline flow where nobody has to do anything? It just goes into production. So if we think about, an enterprise, it's not unnatural for a large enterprise with a mission critical application to only do like one major release per year because they're so scared of all the dependencies that go to it. Or if you're doing it maybe a couple times a year, that's all they have time for, given all of the compliance and all the processes that are around that. But what if we could just give it to you on a daily basis or automate it where you can do multiple releases per day? So what we see is the most innovative enterprises have fully automated their DevOps processes by unlocking what I would call the last mile of the DevOps tool chain, which is data, and automating that final piece of it to the extent that they're doing several releases per day. Or in the case of a Fortune 50 tech company, they're doing, dozens of releases per day, right? So this gives one an advantage in going to market with new applications, new offerings in this digital economy that, you could be a traditional business, a traditional enterprise, and be as agile as, the Amazons and the Airbnbs of the world. And that's what we want to get to. So that's Delphix. And I think the other reason why we've had such great growth is besides the automation from a DevOps toolchain perspective and accelerating the application data lifecycle, we also have a masking product that helps with data compliance. So that's the other piece. So it's one thing to be able to give people data. The other issue is, that data has to be masked and it has to be compliant, because I can't just give you Alan's data, production data to a developer where he or she can see it. So we have a product that we call continuous compliance. And what it does is that it masks data with referential integrity such that you have a single source of truth. So Alan in Oracle is Alan in, DB2 is Alan in SQL Server, all the different products where there's a single source of truth that we can mask with referential integrity and be able to check the big compliance box so that does not slow down the application development process. So the net of it is, we can get you from doing one release a year on your e-commerce application, your B2C mobile application, instead of once a year, how about once a month? How about once a week? How about every single day? So when the business comes to you and says, Alan, I got a great new savings account product that I want to go launch, and I need it like yesterday. And you're like, well, you have to wait till next year or give me 6 months versus, okay, customer, how about I get that to you next week? Or you're a retail company and you want to launch a flash sale on a brand new product that's super exciting. And, you don't have to plan it 6 months in advance. You're like, I got a great innovation. I need to get this out to market. next week, tomorrow. Giving companies that level of agility drives revenue, and revenue growth while still being compliant in this world that we're in is very exciting to CXOs because they're kind of stuck between the rock and a hard places. If you're a CTO or a CIO, it's like the business wants to move fast, but also the business has said, the CFO has said, well, we have to do this safely. We have to make sure that our data is compliant with GDPR and CCPA and HIPAA and all this other stuff. That is sacrosanct. So security and compliance are table stakes. That has to happen before anything else happens, right? Well, the issue is then the business, the people in marketing and sales and product are like, well, we want to get to our customers. And so what's really exciting is Delphix's mission is we want our customers to have their cake and eat it too. We want them to be able to have that agility and that speed while at the same time doing it safely and in a way that's compliant with all of these myriad of regulations that exist. So I'll pause right there, Alan. That was quite.
No, I think I did well. It's a good place to pause. I think you did a great job of setting the table on that. You know, Stephen, one of the lessons I've learned is, first of all, data is sacrosanct, right? It's all about the data, stupid, right? Sometimes we lose sight of that. But not all data is equal. When we talk about getting the data to developers, what kind of data are we talking about there, Stephen? Is it results of tests or feedback loops, you know, from deployed apps or something else? But, you know, because there's data and then there's data.
Yeah.
Well,
What
are we talking?
Well, I'm talking about all types of relational data, but I'll tell you the ones that matter the most to your point is sensitive data. So let's talk about sensitive data. So let's talk about some of the industry verticals that we serve. So think about health insurance, where you have HIPAA records, you have patient data, super sensitive stuff, very large amounts of it. So we have large health insurance companies, you know, healthcare is a huge vertical for us, and that is very sensitive data. So if you want to test something like a claims processing application, so I'm coming out with the latest and greatest claims processing application so that if I want to file my Medicare claims with an app with, you know, insurance company X, that I can do so in a modern way, right? I don't have to call somebody. I can download an app and I can feel safe that if I wanted to go check on the status of my claim or whatever, I can go do this in a modern way. Well, in order to build that, you have to make sure that you have access as a developer to production quality data that is still obfuscated, that is still masked, that still gives you the quality of the testing that one needs, but still is safe. And so that's an example of that sensitive data that could be a very large data set, right? And it's a regulated industry. The other would be clearly like banking. We have a lot of financial services companies. We have large banks that are customers. And so think of the millions or tens of millions of banking customers. So similar thing. I'm so-and-so bank and I want to upgrade and build a new B2C mobile application because, you know, it's time we do that. Well, to test that, we have, again, personal information that has to be protected. And if you think of it in the context of not just because it's good business to protect personal information, the government requires it and will levy hefty fines if you're not in compliance. And so there's these horror stories, and I'll protect the names of these companies where a large digital brand has been fined for over $1 billion in the European Union for several infractions of the GDPR rule. And that's just not something you want on your brand. There's financial liability, but there's also, kind of brand damage where I don't want to do business with a customer that doesn't protect my information. And telecommunications is the other one, right? Where there's been notable breaches. This is all public information, by the way, the whole T-Mobile breach that happened and the class action lawsuits. And so we have a customer in Europe that has hired Delphix and is deploying our technology to protect a petabyte of data that has all of their customer records in it. And it's kind of shocking to think that they would spend that kind of money in this kind of economy that is challenging, but the boards are saying, this is table stakes, this is sacrosanct, you got to have it. But the beauty is we'll say, well, we'll make you compliant, but you don't have to give up your agility for that compliance. So compliance is usually viewed as like an anchor. Data by itself is an anchor, it's slow, but then when you add layers of security and compliance protocols, then it makes it even slower. What we're saying is, well, what if we could just give you that agility? Because we'll be able to provide all these virtual copies of your database to the extent that, you don't have to go slow. You can actually go faster and be in compliance. And that is an unbelievable value prop. And clearly, when you can do something faster like that, and with greater efficiency, that it also drives a hard cost saving. So even in this difficult economy, then you give them like a three-pronged value prop. We'll make sure that we tick the compliance box so you're safe. Secondly, we'll make your developers happy. We'll give you agility and we'll increase the throughput of your software development so they're happy. And then finally, because of this agility and efficiency, you're actually going to save money. We can drive hard cost savings on your infrastructure because you need less resources to go do all of this work. And by reducing your hardware and infrastructure costs, you're also mitigating your carbon footprint. So it goes back to sustainability. Well, if you think of like, virtual machines, right, as a way to drive efficiency. So think about virtual data, right? So if you can take, a petabyte of data and shrink it to, 10% or 5% of the size, in running your business, then you can dramatically reduce your costs as well as your impact of electrical consumption, which then reduces your CO2 carbon footprint, which again, it's just another box that, and I won't say that we sought at the early stages of Delphix to say we're going to build a sustainable software company. It was just a consequence of, being more efficient in data centers to say we've reduced the cost of operations, we've reduced the amount of electricity and resources we have to consume. So therefore, there's even a fourth value prop around sustainability that we're also able to benefit our customers with.
I want to come back to the sustainable and sustainableIT.org in a moment. But I want to go back to something else you said earlier. And that is, look, in these choppy economic times, and quite frankly, as you and I sit here today, Stephen, who the heck knows what 2023, I mean, there's good, there's bad, there's a lot of uncertainty. Let's say that. But one of the things I read is a new requirement coming down the pike this year. I forgot if it was the NIST framework or something else, where the boards of these large companies, public, private, have to sign off on the cybersecurity and compliance, processes and policies that, are being implemented. And this is truly, I don't want to be one of these guys selling FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But this is truly going to bring responsibility for doing, for taking reasonable actions on your cyber and compliance right up to the board level, right? Almost bypassing even the C level, going right to the board level. And that is going to be a reason why they're going to want to make sure that they're doing things like what Delphix is talking about, because, no one wants that headache, right? And it's in the news every day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and there are macro reasons why boards are driving even like security. Cybersecurity has been an issue ever since the rise of the internet, right? So we've always had that, but it's intensified recently. And what I can share with you is I travel around the world. I talk to CIOs and CTOs and CISOs. They're like, hey, Stephen, if you haven't noticed these days, there's a huge all-out war in Eastern Europe. And, the protagonists against the West are actively waging cyber warfare against the West, against the European Union, against the US. And then you have these hostile nation states, and we know who they are. I'll protect the names of you can sort of guess, but
we don't have to. Yeah, you don't know.
We know exactly what's going on. And so this isn't some, very smart geek that's randomly somewhere just trying to go hack into the NSA's network. These are hostile nation states with trained engineers who are trying to take down and slow down the West in any way, shape, or form as part of that process. So we have hostile nation states. We still have cyber criminals that are out there making money off of it. So we just live in this world where cybersecurity is a huge issue. And then the second piece is that, the data privacy regulations. And so as these economies are evolving, the citizens demand that their privacy be protected. And so they're coming down hard on companies to button that stuff up. And so again, it creates that quandary for the CIOs and CTOs of the world is I have to be compliant, but I also have to run a business and be agile and to stay in business. There's no other choice.
And it's getting more.
Yeah. Stephen, we're over time, but quickly, give us a quick, I got maybe 30 seconds to a minute, sustainableIT.org. I know it's a mission. It was started by Delphic's co-founder, CEO, Jed. But if you wouldn't mind, give us a quick highlight.
Yeah, sustainableIT.org is a nonprofit started by Delphix to solicit technology leadership, CIOs, CTOs around the world, many of whom are our customers, to collaborate with and share best practices on how to run more sustainable IT operations. And so if you think about, look, I got all these data centers, they're very resource intensive, they have a huge carbon footprint. How can we leverage, the cloud, public cloud, for example, to promote greater sustainability? What can we do within our own IT practices to promote greater sustainability? And so we really think in the context of how do we make our own enterprises more sustainable, but also how do we drive our products and services for the external world to be more sustainable? And the idea would be that this nonprofit would share content, best practices, and knowledge so that we can basically promote this on a global scale. And I'll give you a simple example of this. Is just there's some vendors that have been used for e-waste. So think of all the IT departments that have old computers or phones, and they just sit somewhere in a warehouse. What do you do with them? You could dispose of them. You could throw them into a garbage dump. What a waste with all that. And then there's companies that will actually take that equipment, many of which is perfectly good equipment, and help donate that to schools that might be underprivileged schools, for example. So figure out a way to dispose of electronic waste. And that seems like such a simple concept, but if you think about all of the corporations around the world and how many devices that they have, and we don't even think twice about this. Is like, what? And so now, like these CIOs, like, hey, I use a vendor here, I use a vendor there, and here's a great way to dispose of your e-waste. Either, and who knows, maybe even make some money off of that, right, by disposing of it. But in the very least, do some good with it. But then there's more advanced techniques of like, well, where do you buy your electricity from, right? If you're a data center, could you buy it from a place that has sustainable electrical sources like hydroelectricity or nuclear that is zero emission, versus buying your electricity from a coal-fired plant? So there's all sorts of specific actionable ideas and methods that are being shared through this organization with the mission of spreading that knowledge across all of the IT industry, as well as within companies and governments around the world, so that people can continue to evolve their best practices around sustainable IT.
I love it. Stephen, unfortunately, I got to cut it here. We got people in the waiting room for our next interview. But hey, man, pleasure having you on here. Don't be a stranger, right? Come on, we can continue this discussion. Come back real soon. In the meantime, best of luck with Delphix, and guys keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Alan. Thanks for having us today.
Pleasure. Stephen Chung, president of Delphix, here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Techstrong TV. Our next guest today on Techstrong is Mackenzie Jackson. Mackenzie is with Git Guardian, and we're going to talk some security here with Mackenzie in just a second. But first, let's welcome him. Mackenzie, welcome to Techstrong TV. How are you today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Doing great. How about yourself?
Very good. So I'm sensing a little bit of an accent. Where are you from?
So originally I'm from New Zealand, but but now I live in Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So
really, oh, that's cool.
We're actually heading over to Amsterdam for KubeCon.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, nice.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So, but a Kiwi originally, huh? Yeah, I heard that. You still have that little bit of a trace of it. Good for you. That's another beautiful place as well. Mackenzie, why don't you give us a little bit of your story, though?
Professional background.
For sure. So I'm Mackenzie. I've been in tech for a very long time. Kind of recently, I was the founder and CTO of a health tech company called Compago, which still exists and running today. But along that journey, I just became obsessed with security and going through the compliances that we need to have, learning more about it, and following on from that, security and understanding it and protecting people's data and almost in a way realizing how unsecure by default kind of everything is. Kind of really made me had a passion for it. So today I'm with a French company called GitGuardian. We do a lot of code securities, but one of the cool things that I'm really involved in is we have a research team, and we do a lot of research around application security, code security, and really kind of trying to do some breakdowns of breaches that have happened. So that's really more my role today, is kind of diving into some security research, and that's a little bit about where I come from.
I love it. Okay. So, and yeah, we talked about GitGuardian. I don't think we gave the URL for the GitGuardian webpage. Is it GitGuardian.com or?
GitGuardian.com is the website. We want to check out that, and we have plenty of resources on there in terms of publications that we've written based on our research.
Got it. All right. So Mackenzie, look, though it's only January, 2023 is off to a banging start in terms of security. We've already seen several major breaches announced. Circle CI, I think there was a T-Mobile breach. It just, the hits just keep coming. And then, even before that, though, everything we read and saw posted or pointed to security really, really being job number one in 2023. Now, superimposed on that, you've got these crazy macroeconomic conditions going on. War, famine, inflation, pestilence, right? Everything that we deal with here in today's world. And, that's got to have an effect on business, obviously. Interest rates, all of that. But yet, from what we hear and see, look, we can't afford to sacrifice security at the altar of inflation, right? We've got to invest. So, from where you sit with your research, what do you see? I want to talk to you about 2023. Kind of what do you see as the big trends, as things that we need to have on our radar? What's your take?
Yeah, absolutely. But you certainly painted a cheery picture.
I'm sorry.
My predictions and our research isn't much cheerier, I will admit. What we're really starting to see is some shifts in security, and we're seeing a lot more investments being made from more so on the adversarial side than we are on kind of the business operations side. We're seeing kind of an imbalance of money being spent from the attackers. And this has really changed the landscape, and we're seeing it already. And coupled with that, we're seeing that targets are actually starting to really kind of shift in the direction. If we look at 2022 as a bit of a guideline, what we started seeing really for the first time in a strong way, and it really ramped up kind of towards the end, is a change in targets shifting towards a lot of developers and a lot of technical people being targeted personally to try and gain access into an organization. And this kind of comes from some large profile breaches that you will see where really it was revealed that if you're targeting someone that's going to have the keys to the kingdom, so to speak, if you're an organization, then technical personnel like developers, like your operations teams, like your sysadmins, they're the targets. If you can access them, that will grant you kind of into the kingdom. So we've seen it with Circle CI and these technical, platforms that are being breached. Is now kind of the targets are really starting to change, and we're seeing kind of really, really close attacks on that, and we think that's going to really kind of skyrocket in 2023. And there's a couple of easy targets that technical people have in terms of, your Git repositories, which are shared throughout the whole companies, which need to be, because that's a collaborative, we're writing source code, we're collaborating on all these different things. Lots of people have access to our code repositories, but they're a high value target because they contain lots of sensitive information. And and secrets and API keys and even things that shouldn't be there, but we all know are there, and attackers have figured that out too. So, I mean, there's lots that definitely happen, but in terms of kind of when you're looking at the targets, definitely we're seeing a shift in the type of personnel that are being targeted, and it's getting much more technical.
It's the same thing with the LastPass breach,
exactly.
Right? They were able to get one employee who actually had access to some of the cloud, even though they claimed the data was still encrypted and hashed and salted and all of that good stuff. They were able to access it via this one employee. Same thing as Circle CI. I think Okta, the whole Okta breach thing is probably tied in here around that as well. But the issue you mentioned with Git, I'm reminded, look, I've been in cyber many, many years. I remember going to a meeting once with the Department of Interior here in the U.S., right? And the Department of Interior has I think 16 or 17 agencies and bureaus that are part of it. One of them was, I think, U.S. Geological Survey. These are smart people, right? They're the people who are measuring earthquakes and all kinds of seismic stuff and all of that good stuff. They've got sensors on the bottom of oceans, on the top of mountains, and everything in between, right? Because they're sensing, they need that info. And we spoke to them about securing these sensors and securing that data. And their thing was, well, no, it's science, right? And it has to be open. If it's not open, people can't use it. Had the same thing at universities, right, where the mission is sharing. It's kind of the same thing you see at Git, right? The whole purpose of Git is to be able to have that code available for the team to use, right? That we don't want one person having the code there and another person may have a different version of that code on their machine and a different, right? We all want to work off of one common repository. And so the idea of making it difficult or trying to lock that down kind of runs counter to the mission almost, right? And so it's hard getting people to wrap their minds around that.
It definitely is. And there's kind of two camps in this. And it's like you're saying, the open source camp and the lock code down. I'm actually more towards the open source camp. And the reason I say that is source code doesn't need to have vulnerabilities in it. It has a source code, it's mapping out your infrastructure and other things like that, but it doesn't need to have the keys to the kingdom, and it shouldn't. But in this gray area where you have private source code shared within the companies, people often get a bit lazy. They will hard code in API keys, and it's all because it's this perceived notion of it's secure because I have to log in to do it, not understanding that the security that you should have on your code and the security that you should have on your security certificates, your API keys, your credentials is like not even on the same planet. And if those credentials and other secrets are in the code, and as an example, like they have extremely low security, the barrier to entry for attacker, it comes there. So I think it's kind of less about locking down your source code and more about understanding that it is not secure. And that doesn't mean everything has to be open source and we can't protect trade secrets and other elements. I totally understand that. But just understanding that your source code by its very nature is never going to be a secure asset. And we just got to stop pretending like it is.
Agreed. I agree with you, man. All right. So that was one prediction or something for us to be watching. What else you got?
Well, something kind of interesting along the way here is we've actually noticed a huge increase in the companies using MFA and locking down different systems. This is fantastic. And then last year, particularly towards the end of last year, we saw a huge increase in the sophistication by attackers to get past MFA. And so we're now starting to realize that MFA and other type of multi-authentication types are not sufficient enough to kind of give us the protection that we think that they do. And, we've seen it in an example being last year with their Uber breach, where an attacker got access into Uber's internal networks and then got access to their PAM system, their privileged access management system, and moved through. None of that should have happened because all of that was protected by multi-factor authentication. But behind multi-factor authentication are humans, and we're always susceptible to phishing campaigns. And through some other areas of sophistication, we're starting to see that these additional levels of security are starting to break down. And behind systems that have MFA in them, we started to get a little bit lazy in kind of security. So in the example of Uber that I just had, there was plain text credentials all through the server because that's protected by MFA. So everyone has this false sense of security again. So one of the predictions that we're definitely going to start seeing based on trends is that we're going to have more and more attacks and breaches. They're going to bypass MFA. And the sophistication of the types of phishing campaigns and kind of bypass attacks to do this is going to increase based on pretty much that attackers are willing to spend more money than we are as defenders. So another one there, MFA bypass, definitely going to start seeing more of those in
on that
note, I saw Apple actually Apple released an update yesterday to iPhones, iPads, and I believe iOS and macOS, as well as watchOS. That's going to allow for I forget what they call it, but an extra level to MFA.
Yeah.
So beyond two-factor, something about the hardware as well. I don't know if you saw that.
I haven't seen that exact trend, but that's exactly...
Just came out yesterday.
Right, I have to have a look. But, that's exactly the types of security that we need to have, something that we know, something that we have, so, a hardware piece, and something that we are. Those are the kind of elements of zero trust. And if we can get those three elements together, then security, it doesn't just go up by another factor every time we add a level. It goes up by, a factor of 10. The difficulty level goes up significantly. And it's funny, the last 2 years, I've been hammering on about everyone about MFA, and now all of a sudden you look at what we're seeing in research and trends, and you go, oh my God, like now that's not enough. It was hard enough trying to convince everyone to get on board of MFA.
And now we got to go to MFA 2.
Yeah, MFA right? Plus, yeah.
But this is
security, right? It's always... It's a cat and mouse game, and you're always, needing to take it to the next level. So
yeah, absolutely.
We've got time for one more.
Well, I've got one more, and I think it's good. We finish on something slightly more positive because it's not all bad.
We all need some good news, man.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so one of the areas that we've seen, there's kind of been a big detriment is the software supply chain. We've seen lots of software supply chain attacks. And really what we're seeing is there's this huge lack of understanding about our software supply chain. When you look at all the dependencies that we have in open source software and third-party applications and third-party services and the dependencies that they have, we've been completely blind about understanding our software supply chain, but there's been some amazing stuff happening. So, for instance, in legislation in America, you have the SBOM, which was added in the cybersecurity bill that was put out of actually understanding our software bill of materials. What SBOM means, for those that don't know, but coupled that with lots of fantastic work by some of the large companies. So Google has put out what they're calling SALSA, which is security levels for software artifacts. We have NIST that has brought out their cyber supply chain risk management. And so all of these different levels, and what we're starting to see is it's taken a while for adoption, of the SBOM that came out, a few years ago now. Since then, we've had Log4j, which has kind of accelerated people's need to adopt it. And what we're seeing is that people's understanding of their attack surface and supply chain is really starting to expand. And we're getting some great frameworks and tools to actually see it. So we're not going to solve the issue of supply chain attacks in 2023. But this is one trend that we're really seeing the doors. It's not closing, but at least we are understanding where the doors are now. And it's starting to look a bit more manageable. Because 2 years ago, the concept of software supply chains, I think, was just terrifying for everyone, and we all felt completely vulnerable to it. And, like passengers in a car crash. And now I feel like the car's still crashing, but at least we're in the driver's seat. and we're getting better. So I think there's some amazing stuff happening.
Awareness, being aware of the issue, is the first step towards, taking that issue on. Hey, Mackenzie, I want to thank you for coming on and talking to us about this today. Continued success with Get Guardian. Don't be shy about you want to come on here and talk about research you're doing, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. I love Techstrong TV. You always have great content. So I really hope I can be back and share some of the more research with you.
We'd love to have you. All right. Get Guardian here on Techstrong TV. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Techstrong Women, where we feature amazing women doing amazing things in tech. I am Jody Ashley, executive producer here at Techstrong, and I'm joined by my co-host Tracy Reagan, CEO at Deploy Hub, and active on tons of boards of the Linux Foundation that I can't keep track of, and a million other things she does. And we're excited to be here today with you. Before I introduce today's guests, I want to give you a quick update about what's going on here at Techstrong. We'll be at DevOps Asia Summit in Singapore on February 10th. You can also register now for TechStrongCon 2023 on March 16th. And you can also catch up with the Techstrong team at RSA Conference 2023 in San Francisco, April 24th through the 27th. We will be there. And you can register for all of our events by going to techstrongevents.com, and be sure to check out everything going on techstrong.tv every day. Got a lot of great shows and content for you guys to watch over there. Hey, Tracy, what do you got? What do you got on your mind today?
Well, aren't you glad they don't have shows in December?
Yeah.
Really? Wouldn't it be a drag if one of the big shows decided to have it like the 15th of December through the 20th?
Seriously.
And I think that most shows should get shorter when they're in person, but that's not what I had on my mind today. I just thought about, wow, February is just around the corner and you're already thinking about traveling.
I know.
Hey, nuclear fusion. That blows my mind. That one really got me. I was like, that can't be right. For so long we were told it was impossible. I lived in Chicago, and they always talked about the lab out there with this massive centrifuge trying to create with these massive magnets this a little mini star, and then somebody does it in the lab in California with some lasers, which is really cool. The idea of light, creating light.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now I know this is we're pre-recording, everybody, so this we are in the right now as we're recording. We are in the period of time where we're celebrating light. We have Hanukkah, Christmas, the winter solstice, which is the darkest day of the year, but you celebrate it because the next day we're going to have more light. And we find nuclear fusion that's going to create, use light to create. It's going to take energy to create it, but what we create creates more energy. It has such far-reaching, it's a major disruptor in so many ways. From the global geopolitical, world, if we didn't rely on oil, it would change so much in the world to make people's lives better in so many ways. So I read the article like 4 times, and I'm still blown away that somebody actually created a little mini star in a lab in California. So that's where my head's been this week, thinking about how that would change. They say it's going to take like 10 to 15 years for that to be real. That is not very far down the road. That is not long at all. We can do that. We can do that. We can wait, even if it took 20 years, we can do that. And maybe it just might save the planet. I'm a big environmentalist.
Yeah.
I drive electric cars. I do everything I can to minimize my dependency on oil, and I don't want anybody to send me hate mail to say I'm an oil hater. I love my pontoon boat. It requires oil. It uses gasoline. So I don't hate oil. I just know that we can't continue to rely on it. And it is about the kids, right? It's about the children. What is the world we're going to leave them? And I think nuclear fusion, that is a massive game changer for us. And let's hope it's real.
That's really cool. I should have known that would be your takeaway for the week.
Absolutely. I think we should hear more about it. I feel like I got little glimpses of it, and I saw it on a ticker actually on CNN, and I had to go look on the CNN website and then read about it. I'm like, aren't we having a massive party about this?
I know there's so much going on in the world. It seems to blot out the cool stuff, sometimes gets blotted out by all the garbage that's going on. So I think that's a great thing to cover. Thank you, Tracy. So I would like to introduce you all to our guest today, and I'm probably going to mess up your last name. Sophia, is it Palamarchuk?
That's perfect.
Nice. All right, I did it. Woohoo! She is the co-founder and CEO of Aptum. We are excited to have you with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm very excited to be here, Jody and Tracy. Nice to meet you as well. This is the first time we meet through Zoom. So yeah, as you said, I'm CEO and co-founder of Aptum. Aptum is a startup in the mobile performance space. So we have a product for developers that want to improve the user experience of their mobile apps. And this is my second company. I'm also a partner, and I actually started my career at Abstracta, which is a consulting business, which hired me as their first female performance engineer almost 10 years ago. And that's how I got to be now working in mobile performance and, being an entrepreneur, which is something that I'm passionate about, also creating new products.
So when you were at Abstracta, how did that form was that right after college, or had
I
you
was
worked
actually
in?
still in college. I'm originally from Uruguay, South America, a small but strong country between Argentina and Brazil. If you haven't been south, I would recommend you to make a stop in Uruguay. And the thing in Uruguay is that usually you're still studying at university and you already start working. So you do kind of both at the same time, which is, I know, is not that common in the US. Usually you guys take the summer break and then you do some internships. For some reason, we started actually doing this many years ago when you work during the day and then you go to classes during the night. It's very intense, but the thing is that you learn a lot by doing, and also it shapes your career. So the last years of university, at least in engineering, it's 5 to 6 years career to get your bachelor degrees. At some point, you're actually able to choose certain subjects that you're more interested at the end of the career, but usually you have already started working in the industry. So you have an idea on which area is more interested. Is like network engineering, even like ML or AI could be an area. Architecture, like software architect, like you can actually choose your own path. So I started working at Abstracta when I was in my 3rd year of university. They hired me as a junior, of course, to start working in performance, which was more like performance testing, but also some performance engineering, which is more related to DevOps today. At that time, we wouldn't call it. We wouldn't have that as a role. But yeah, they basically, put this ad up at our uni. I got it. I went to an interview. I had just I was back to Uruguay because I was just 1 year abroad living in Ireland, which that's another story as well. But basically, they like me and they hire me.
That's a very interesting model. I think that the US companies, I know, always complain that our universities are sort of behind in terms of what they're teaching. I mean, there's probably universities teaching a DevOps class, but probably not Kubernetes yet. So it seems like that's a real logical way to do that in your 3rd year, because then you're getting a feedback loop directly from the employer back to you, back to the university. I think there's a gap in the US system that we do take that time off. And I think we call them internships, and you might do a summer internship, but actually taking a job, but there's no better way to experience the real world than actually working.
And usually you start like 6 hours part-time, depends, they don't hire you full-time because they know you're still studying, and they want you to actually keep studying as well, because you want to get more raises, right? The more you advance in your career, and once you actually get your bachelor as well. But as you said, there's more, at least how I felt, that there's a close connection between industry and education. So there's a feedback loop as well, and many founders of startups, they actually teach at university there. So they bring that view from what the market needs, where is the industry. Of course, there are some subjects that are like still old, in the sense that they're teaching you things that maybe they're not that relevant, but most of them, it's still the basics of engineering that you need to learn. So things that you might not find, like it happened to me, like this makes no sense. Why am I learning this? But then many years after, you realize that was useful because it helps you with problem solving, or it helps you with, certain skills that are not specifically related to the technology. But again, I think it's challenging, as I said, because you're working and studying, but it gives you and it prepares you better for the future and for actually knowing, where do you want to specialize in IT in this case, right? Which was, I studied computer engineering.
So I have a offbeat question, I think. Do you speak Spanish or Portuguese?
Spanish and Portuguese.
Oh, really?
Because I'm married with a Brazilian.
Okay.
we speak Spanish in Uruguay, yeah. As in most of Latin America.
But Brazil's Portuguese.
Brazil is Portuguese, yeah.
Yes.
But because they're so big, I can say there's two 200 million people that speaks Portuguese that live in Brazil. But yeah, and we have a border with Brazil, so actually a lot of people in Uruguay speaks Portuguese because
that's what I didn't know what the primary language was. So in university and in your first job, how many women did you run into? Is it like the US where we're like maybe 1 or 2%, or are there more women?
It's so at work I was we were 9 at the time, 9 people in the company, and I was the second woman in that group that I was hired. Then we actually grew a lot, and that proportion we didn't kept that like 2 to 10, you know, it was sometimes more, sometimes less, specifically in the technical side, because as well, then you start hiring like for marketing or, you know, financial, and then more roles come where women are, you know, typically hired for. But it was usually minority. There were some classes at the very last years of university where I was like 1 in 40. That happened even more when you were doing, and we did share that with some, I have friends that they did like mechanical engineering, that was like 1 to 60. So for computer engineering, at least in Uruguay, it's in terms of all the careers you can do under the engineering faculty, is the one that has more women. Actually, it's like around 20% that enter every year, but then it's less that actually get to the end. So it's less that finish. So that percentage at the end and last year was around 13, which is super low.
Yeah, it's really low. It's low. I don't know what it is in the US, but I think it's probably around 10 to 13.
Right.
And I find in the US, retaining women in technology is hard because many go off and have kids. And then if they take 3 years off or 4 years, heaven forbid, many of them tell me they feel that they're not relevant anymore. Our technology changes so quickly. It's like, oh, well, we were doing C when my kid was born, and now I've got to learn Python, or, you know,
Totally.
Such a fast industry, it's hard.
Yeah, and it happens again, when I mentioned that you started working while you're studying, even if you have kids in the middle, which is not uncommon for women, at least in Uruguay, you know, that means you're 35, 40, and maybe you have a year of experience, but you haven't finished yet your career because you have kids. So it's super challenging. And I think that's why also part of what I want to do right in my role is also to just be able to show that, of course, not only we are capable, but even if we have to, you know, leave the industry for a while for whatever reason, we should be able to get back on track. And I think that's our responsibility, right? Because it's also up to us to get back, and it's challenging. But I know many women that were able to go back after having kids, or after even having, you know, going through surgery, disease, whatever, that will keep you away from work for a certain period of time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in technology, if you're okay with always learning and knowing that you don't know everything, but you have transferable skills that you can pick new things up, that you're okay. But I think that a lot of people feel like, well, I don't know the answers and I'm not sure if I should go back in, and there's some hesitancy. And I see that more with women than men. Men sometimes will just jump back in and say, well, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, there's something I don't know what it's like biologically, but there's something about confidence that I just see it happened to me. I'm also part of like not having that confidence that you don't know it now, but you're going to learn it, right? My own experience now is that we with Optim, we start in performance. I mentioned we're expanding to security, and when you talk about cyber security, it's like, oh, this whole new world. You know, I still learning, and it's not that hard. Right? And I have people in my team that, you know, are experts, and I speak the same language right now. Something that maybe 3 months ago I was scared at the beginning because it wasn't my background for the last 10 years. But again, like you learn, but it's that thing that sometimes we put that barrier ourselves, that this is too hard, maybe we are not good enough, you know, all those thoughts that you have in your head.
You know, I think we have imposter syndrome so bad. When I was bugging Jody to become part of a host on this, she was just like, I don't know if I could do it. I was like, oh, come on, there's so much fun to talk to.
One thing that helps is just, building your own startup, it's like there's every week there's something that you have never done before. And that's from, talking to investors, raising money, doing like bookkeeping, firing people, hiring people. There's always something new. And many skills are skills that you haven't learned actually, because it's not something that that they're taught at university. It's just by doing that you learn. And that's how I gain more confidence. It's like, okay, I did this, now what's next? And then I apply that to different areas. But again, it's something that should come from you. And I think it's just like little steps and little gains help you build that confidence. And of course, talking to other women that have already done it and that they can push you forward.
Absolutely.
What do you have? Do you have a support system of other women that you network with?
Yes, several. I have one female I have female founders from the US that I met when I was living in SF. I have female founders from Latin America, which we share some challenges when hiring, for example, from Colombia, Mexico. And I have groups where we have something that we share in terms of like, challenges or problems. So we speak kind of like the same language, even raising from VCs, for example. So I have groups focus on that. I have a support network, of course, of my partners are the companies. I have co-founders. That helps a lot. They're all males, but they are like very like woman, empowerment is what we want. Mostly because they have daughters. So it's about their future as well. And that's a really good way of having support from men in this quest of, women in tech, is because they want to see their daughters in the future to have a possibility and to be motivated to study something related to IT. So that's like, in a way being a role model for them. So I have that support network that it's amazing.
And I feel like that's a very intrinsically female quality, that we're more likely to seek out peers and groups and bounce stuff off of each other, where I see in jobs that I've had in the past where men tend to just power their way through it and figure out they can do it all by themselves, and not always very successfully. And we've spoken with so many really successful women like you. And one of the things they all have in common, Tracy, is that they've created a support system for themselves where they can bounce all of these things off of other people, because there's just so many startups in this world. I mean, how many people go and work for a company that has 5,000 people anymore, right? Or if they do, it's just long enough to get what they need to go out and start their own or do something smaller. So I just think it's just a really empowering thing to have people around you that can really help you. And you
and of course you have friends, right? We all have friends, but sometimes friends, they don't actually get it. It's just like super hard to explain like what you're going through, because you have, all these investors are saying no, and they're like, but you're so good, or maybe you should do something else. But then you say like, no, but this is normal. So it's like, you have to explain. It's like talking to your mom, right? She's there to support you, but she doesn't get it. She's like,
talking
I'm so
to
proud
investors,
of you.
talking to investors can be really, really hard. Exactly. I know I've gone through many of them looking for funding, and women only get 2% of the funding.
And when you share those numbers with people outside these groups, they're like, oh, wow, I had no idea. And when 2%. You talk to, female founders, like, it's so hard. We know. It's so hard. Like, what do you need? Like, let's help each other. So I
have to admit, the whole FTX thing, I think that was the company's name, blew up. I was just like, you know what? It teaches them right. Just because this guy had crazy hair, wore a t-shirt and shorts, and came out of Stanford. Says he was a stereotype, and they were just like, oh, you fit the mold. You look like the potential next, I don't know, Elon Musk or something. Which I don't know if we need any more of them. I think more women should.
I don't know if that's a great one to use.
Well, there you go. I mean, there's some, there's some amazing powerhouse women. Speaking of which, it's so sad to see Nancy Pelosi finally leaving. No matter what doesn't matter which side of the spectrum you're on, left or right, everybody, you have to give that. She's a tough lady. and she's been in a male-dominated, occupation for years and years and years and succeeded. I look up to her and I admire the work that she's done. And we just need more women who are willing to, I guess, put on the gloves and get out there on the mat. And it's kind of, where we're at right now, and really push for more funding. Tell us a little bit about Aptim.
So Aptim, we started as an idea inside Abstracta. Abstracta, we provide services and consulting for, software testing, DevOps, the whole quality around development. We did have actually some products of our own, but they all were kept internal. We were just using it with customers. And Aptim basically was a product that we built for one customer in the US, that we were analyzing the user experience of their mobile apps, and they really like it. And they actually asked us to just buy a license, but there was no way to buy a license because it was something that we, just hook inside our platform and kind of use it very in an artisanal, handmade way. And that was something that there was, put aside until, and this was like 2015 actually, until beginning of 2019, when I was actually in a coffee shop in Palo Alto, very cliche, meeting with this customer. But this is many years after. I was like, we were friends at that time. And he asked me like, hey, what about this product that he had that I remember? Like, it was so good. I've never seen something like the way, like how easy it was to use, like the way that the results were shown, because basically Aptim, you can just run it automatically and it will scan your app and show you a lot of performance issue, response time, things that developers will look like when the app is slow or is not working on this device or in this network, the experience is not the best. And I told him like, yeah, I know we never did anything with it. It's just there. And he was at the time actually transitioned. He sold his company, it was a startup. He was transitioning to a new role. It's like, if you want to do something with it, call me. And this is a male founder from Silicon Valley, right? And I was like, okay. And then I went back and I kept thinking like, should we do something with it? Like, and I went back to like reviewing with the team, like, were there other customers using the product? Like, and then we were like, yeah, it's just a matter of someone focusing on actually, taking this and do something with it. Like the product, or the time was the tool is there, and that's how it started. We took the IP, which at the time was owned by Abstracta. We incorporated Aptim as a C Corp in Delaware. I had to convince one of the founders at Abstracta to be my CTO, so I could be the CEO. And we, form a team of 4 engineers, and we made it to actually launch the product in the middle of the pandemic. So it was May 2020.
Wow.
Very good timing. Very good timing in the sense that we were fully remote already, because I was in SF, the team was part in Uruguay, part in Argentina. And also because that the pandemic actually saw like huge growth in mobile, specifically in gaming. A lot of people in their house, playing games, basically. And we launched just in time without knowing where that growth in the gaming industry happened. So we got a lot of inbound interest from customers. So we didn't have to do any marketing and sales for the first months. We just got to close deals directly from the product, literally. And then we kept building all the automation part that was in our roadmap, how to integrate Aptim into like a pipeline where you can run it automatically after you have a new build of your app. Now we were expanding to security because we want to do more checks in the pipeline, not only performance and potentially other areas. So, this has been our ride the last 4 years. Very, very lean. We did raise money from angels, but we haven't raised any money since then. And the main reason is because first, we were thinking about raising money this year. We thought we talked with some investors and we realized this is not the right time. We need more growth, but for more growth, also at some point we will need more money. So we are
It's a
trying
balance.
to.
It's so hard to know when to
Exactly.
pull the trigger. I can tell you from my first company, I'm glad that we never raised money, and it was we had some offers to buy it, and we turned them down. Because keeping control of if you can manage it, and you can keep control of your company, you're better off. To be quite honest.
Well, I learned a lot about raising money and like giving power to investors. Before I thought like, this is what we need to do. This is a way of doing things. I wouldn't suggest that to everyone right now. We're so lucky either. That our angel investors are the best we could choose. Like they literally let us, made our own decisions, but also support us. For example, now that I want to expand to securities, they were like, yes, what do you need from us? Even if they want to put more money, we say no, it's not the right time, because again, we're going to get more diluted. So I also didn't want that to happen.
Exactly.
Lose control.
We got offers. Question.
Exactly. We got offers this February this year from investors at a valuation that I wasn't willing to give away part of the company. And we say no. And then we always found ways to just like basically be sustainable, right? Pay the bills, pay the team.
Learn to be
lean.
Yes, it's so important.
And almost, a year after we decided like, should we fundraise? We're still alive. And unfortunately, I know many companies and startups at our stage, which were like seed stage, that had to shut down because they weren't able to, have high burn rate. They weren't able to raise money in the current environment, and they had, had to make a tough decision. So yeah, it's kind of, I want to keep in control. I want to be in control of what's going to happen. I feel if I bring more people with different interests, then things are going to go sideways. So I'm pretty. Yeah.
Yes, I've always, I've never raised money. I've always tried to keep it lean and sustainable, and pivot when you need to. But I have made the attempt to raise money. And I have not met too many female investors. And the ones that I do meet tend to be kind of down on the partnership rung, and they're not too high up, and they disappear after they bring me in. So it can be, that can be kind of hard, not to see you're sitting at a table and, you've got a bunch of guys, and quite honestly, it can be really disappointing.
Yeah, I think that's the other part that needs to change for this 2% that we talk about, is actually having more women on the investment side.
Yeah,
because again, the bias, unconscious bias, we all have them. It's not like you have them, we don't. Everyone has unconscious biases. It's just having more diversity on both sides, both founders and investors. I did have that experience of meeting. I didn't meet with many investors. I can say maybe like 30, 40, maybe, 4 max were female investors. All the rest were male.
Yeah.
And as you said, some were more like associates. So it's not, they are actually are not like decision-making roles. Also, something that happened to me is like being given the opportunity to raise money and talking to investors. I always try to find those where I thought I had more things like similarities, like they are going to understand where I come from. So I did my research. I spent a lot of time researching how investors think, who will open the door, of course asking for introductions, but also maybe cold emailing some that I thought like they might be interested because of this thing that they are supporting, or some are very clear that they actually want you to cold email them because they want to get like a diverse pipeline. But others, it's just because they're very interested in our space. And it happens that there's a woman in the partnership, so I want to contact her. And that happened to me, and I was very I actually asked for other founders introductions only to their female investors, because that's like, how can I create my pipeline with female investors as well? Otherwise, if the same happens sometimes when you're hiring, right? You have to, at least in my experience, you have to be conscious that I want more women. I want to interview more women for this role as well. So I'm going to go out and find them, not just wait for them to come. because generally speaking, if out of university it's only 10%, it's obvious that maybe I'm going to get only 10% CVs from women, right? But I have to be, I have to do that extra work. And I'm glad that I did that both when hiring, but also when I was selecting which investors I wanted to speak with. So not only male, also female, not only maybe, Americans, maybe immigrants as well, kind of mixing up my pipeline of investor meetings so I can have that variety. And at the end of the day, that's what I was thinking about in terms of who you bring to your cup table, having diversity.
And there's a lot of awesome men out there who want women to succeed, who are doing their mentorship. They're just harder to find.
Well, one of our lead angel investors, he's like that.
Yeah,
he's amazing in the sense that he's proud to be supporting other women startups. He actually built a lot of companies based on only men, and I think he also wants to change that for the future with future generations. And he's like that. He just loves supporting women, and he's more focused on like, you are so smart. It happens that you're a woman and I want to help you, more than just, oh, because you're a woman, I help you. Because that's also something that happens, right? Like, I don't want to be treated differently. I just have the same skills. I can build businesses. I can build billion-dollar businesses. It just happens that I'm a woman.
Exactly. I always say that. I don't want to be treated differently. Treat me the same.
That happened to me with some female investors. It's like, oh, because you're a woman, we have this special thing for you. Right. Like, I don't want to be treated special. Like, for example, accelerators. I never wanted to go to an accelerator.
I've actually reached out to some of those accelerators, and the problem with them is if I was doing something that was more female oriented, maybe something with selling cookies or makeup, they would relate to it better. And that's the problem. We don't have a lot of women in technology who are VCs. You have to have the combination, right? Because a lot of there's women investors out there, but they're not into technology, so they're not going to invest in technology. They're going to invest in something else. Exactly. I swear, many times I was at like a VC kind of event, and I just decided to try this on for size, and I pitched a company that was a clothing company for women, and everything that we made had pockets, because you can buy things and the guys, they have these really cool pockets inside. And I had a VC asking, oh, I want to see some of your clothes. And it was like, just kidding.
Hey, but the pockets in our clothes is a real problem.
I mean, I will pay for that.
I see.
I'm going to say something that maybe sometimes I use my husband coats just because of the pockets. It's like, this is so convenient.
I do too. That's why I tested it. And they were like, that's a fabulous idea. I was like, yeah, we could name it Pockets. That's the name of the company. But I swear I could have.
Talking about the holidays, last year I bought matching pandemic pajamas for the whole family, and they were all identical from the same company, but none of the female pajamas had pockets. But the men's pajamas did, and they cost the same amount of money, and they looked identical. And I was like, what the hell?
I don't know who decided that design. I'm pretty sure someone made that decision, and we should stick to it.
Isn't it sad that as women we can get excited about something as simple as pockets? That just cracks me up.
My lesson was, yes, there are women out there who want to spend money on women, but they're going to spend money on what they get excited about. Yeah. And when you're in an industry like Sophia and I are, there just aren't a lot of women that get excited about. I'm into SBOMs and supply chain DevOps intelligence, which I get totally turned on. I could talk about it for hours, but
yeah, we are passionate. It happened to me when I realized that actually, enterprise SaaS businesses founded by women. There was a VC, very well-known VC in SF, that they wanted to do a dinner with female founders in enterprise SaaS. So they reach out to people they knew, from not only SF but whoever that could fly as well. And at the end, we were about 20 in that group, which was great. But they told us, like, it was so hard to find you. It's like, it took us, we thought we wouldn't make it possible. Because it's, again, like enterprise, selling software to enterprise, it was wider even than us. I would be like, I'm more like on the technical side of enterprise, which is even like a niche. Because in this case, you could have also like enterprise, like payroll solutions or, other things.
Exactly.
But us is like about the tech that the companies run on, right? It's super, it's an area that is not common to have women. I can tell you, I talk with, in that list of investors, I probably talk with all female investors, which are probably few that actually invest in our space in the whole US. It's not a lot.
Not a lot.
Because again, they have to understand, like you have to be, you need to first understand to actually, speak the same language. You need to be interested, to be excited, you need to be confident. So usually they will come from being practitioners, operators. I think those were the best investors, like they have actually done something and then they turn into VC. All of the investors we have now, they were actually founders themselves. So that helps a lot because they understand you, they have empathy, they know things are not always gonna go the way you want them to. But yeah, it's super hard to find women in the same space. In our technical space, even harder. And let's away if you're like women and also Latinas, like you're minority and a minority. I never felt like that was something that was a disadvantage. I know it's like, this is how things are. How can I use this in my favor in a way? So that's why I got this network of women in Latam, for example. Like, so I can relate and I can relate to them, they can relate to me. They have investors that have invested in them, so they recommended which ones are the best. So it's just good to have like your group of peers that you identify with because they understand you better. But then again, it's like you are competing with everyone else in the world. So why would you treat me differently?
Yeah.
So when you were a young woman or a little girl, where did you decide you were interested in this kind of stuff? Like, I'm always curious because we've talked with people whose parents told them they had to do STEM or they wouldn't pay for their college education, and they never thought it was something they'd want to do. But then when they did it, they enjoyed it. But how did you get? Because I think it's super important for us to think about that with our girls.
I agree, ones. And that's also I think because. When you look at the numbers, like the amount of women that actually choose a career is like you decided that many years before. So what happens while you're in high school? Right. What are you talking with your friends? Like, is it something that you're going to be interested in or not? And like just focusing on that population, I think is very important to actually increase the future number of girls in tech. My story is not common in the sense that it's not something that I wanted to do for my whole life. It's not like, oh, I want to be a computer engineer or even an entrepreneur or a CEO. Never, ever occurred to me that I didn't even know that was a possibility, right? And in my family, they were all like lawyers, doctors, my parents, architects, no engineers, no computer engineers. Actually, yes, my engineers, yes, but no computer engineers. So I didn't have that like, oh, you have to do this or this is a future, or it's like whatever you want to do, you can do it. I was very good with numbers. So my first take was like, I should do economics. This is kind of an area that I'm interested. I want to learn how the economies work and why this happens. But this is more like understanding the world kind of. That was why I thought economics was the career for me. I actually started university in Uruguay studying economics. I didn't like it after the first semester. This is not for me. This is not what I imagined. But at the same time, I also, and this is part of my life, I did like many things at the same time when I wasn't sure. I also started engineering. So I did like 2 universities. engineering, the only reason why I did it is because I was able to enter as well when I finished high school. You had like different options, so I can do economics or engineering, but actually studying mechanical engineering.
Oh wow!
Because again, why not? I didn't like the other ones. That's the truth. I was exposed to computers since I was a child. That's true. Mostly because my brother played a lot and I got access to that, but it wasn't something that I thought like, oh, I could actually work using computers or actually programming. So it wasn't until like the second semester of the first year when I said like, economy is not for me. I'm doing this mechanical engineering thing that I didn't really like it. I already felt that. So I tried programming as one of the subjects that was shared with all the engineerings, and I just fall in love. I was like, oh, I can create things. Just like writing a program, then like running it, compiling and seeing that, oh, it actually does, what I want. And then I can change this. And then that I was amazed.
It was that immediate gratification that got me too. It's funny. I studied econ my first 2 years and mechanical engineering.
Oh, really?
I swear, I wanted to build cars. In fact, I went to Cal Poly Pomona, which is they consider it a technical school, and they have really small classes. And one of my classes, we got to build a car, like a go-kart, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. My mother said, "What are you going to do? Go move to Detroit?" And when I thought about it, I was like, I don't want to move to Detroit. And so I started working on some of the programming for the car. And that's when I was like, oh my goodness, I do something and it's actually on the screen already.
Yeah,
and that's what got me.
It's building things.
But it was
two
immediate.
Things that I learned. It's like building things and just seeing the results and understanding how things work. Then I was like, oh, this is how a computer works. And this is how this works. And like, all the different layers and how do you get a signal when you're connected. So I was amazed by that. But these were the two things, like building things, something that I was, okay, like this is, and that's when I felt like, okay, this is my career. Like I feel, very comfortable and happy here. But because that first year was super intense, I was doing like 2 different careers and not knowing what to do with my life. Is that then I took that year off, I went to Ireland. But then I came back with even more assurance that I chose the right career, because in Ireland, I met people from Amazon, from Google, like everyone that was in Dublin working for the headquarters of these tech companies. They were like, oh yeah, you should study this. Like, this is, the future. And I was like, okay, I'm ready to finish my degree. But it wasn't, something that I always felt this is my call. And the same happened.
I just love hearing people's stories of how
the same happened when I
got to where they are.
Yeah, when I actually, as I told you the story of Optin, it wasn't like I want to be an entrepreneur. It's like there's this thing here that we built. There's this person that has a lot of influence and can mentor me to launch a startup, and I'm in Silicon Valley. Let's do it. It was like connecting the dots. But it's not something that I was planning every day, and because I wasn't planning it, it also meant that a lot of things I have to learn by just doing them. But that's when you have your support network or your mentors. I believe 100% in mentors. I think that can change lives, both for like support when you're, emotional support for sure, but also like someone that understands what you're going through and can give you, that, feedback that you need, that it's not going to be, again, your mom or sometimes even your coworker or your co-founder when you're like, facing the same challenges. So having mentors as well has been a key part of my whole journey of becoming an entrepreneur and just gaining that confidence as a female founder in a space where we are minority.
Confidence is so important, and it's an area I think that a lot of women, we just don't oftentimes have the confidence. I always tell people, or tell my lady friends who are going through similar things, I tell them, go get a black belt. I have a black belt. I wouldn't got a black belt. I do practice what I preach, but it teaches you to get on the mat with guys. And it builds confidence in a way that I can't really put my finger on. I can just say, if confidence is something, to our listeners out there, as a woman that you're struggling or you haven't found your voice yet, it's hard to find your voice often. Go get a black belt. It's a really, really good way to do it. Maybe now that the pandemic's over, we can start going to exercise. Well, it's not really over, but it's getting better. Let's hope that we don't have another pandemic coming out of China from, some crazy strain of COVID, but get in the gym with some guys and go to the mat with some guys, and it'll change how you are at work.
That's great, Tracy. I think that's a great place because we are pretty much out of time. We've gone quite a while. Time flies when you're having a great conversation. Sophia, it was so great to meet you. Thank you for being here. Expect to hear from me again soon because I would love to have you on a couple of my other shows that we do here at Techstrong. You and I have chatted a little bit and timing hasn't worked out, but would love to see you again. And Tracy, thank you again for another fun episode of Techstrong Women. And we will see you guys back here in a couple of weeks. So thanks a lot and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you both.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Well, we are really wrapping things up in a great way here, and AWS reInvent. It's been a fantastic week in our secret location, secret studio. That's it, the win here in Las Vegas. So AWS reInvent 2022. So I have the great pleasure of being joined by Manoj Nair, who is Chief Products Officer with Sneak. Welcome, man.
Thank you. Good to be back on Techstrong TV.
You seem like you're holding up pretty well. Day 3 or day 4 or whatever it is for
This
you.
is it,
You made it. You made it. Right? Get to go home here pretty soon. Well, so tell folks about yourself. We were talking a little bit about your background, about coming into security, moving out, and going to cloud, and now coming back in the developer world. That's pretty. I think is a cool story. I love your background.
Yeah. No. So I'm an engineer. I maybe should have a T-shirt that I used to code or something like that at one point. But I was a kernel developer, and I'll go back to that later on in the progression, and then started doing a bunch of data management software, and ended up at RSA, helped building out a security analytics business, and 5 years into it, booming business, and then I get a nation state attack. And I learned for the first time, like real, kind of real life. It's like that punch that hits you in the face that you're not ready for, and then you're like, oh wow, that was compliance, not really security. So the rest of the time there was like, okay, we gotta really think about security from a different perspective. I spent a bunch of time after that doing more cloud SaaS companies, data protection, and all that, and saw the opportunity at Sneak as I was thinking of what to do next. Like, do I want to go back to security? And I said, this is different. So this goes back to kind of my developer roots, right? As a kernel developer, I hated static analysis tools. It's like too noisy, scanners too noisy. Developers want speed. And Sneak's magic was really flipping the whole thing on its head. Instead of thinking about yet another security tool trying to solve a whole bunch of problems. No, let's go back to the real, as far into the start of the process of where the problems originate. And that really resonated to me. It's like, okay, this flips the problem on the head. We would stand on the stage at RSA, say, security needs to be built in, not bolted on. No one really knew until Sneak was created. And Gaipo and the founders there just fundamentally took, okay, let's make it easier for developers to do their job. But, subliminally in there, the security keeps getting better and better and better, and it's powered by amazing intelligence. So it's kind of, feels like connection for a lot of parts of my journey coming back together and
kind of circling back and
Yeah.
kind of doing it the right way.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I tell people it's like we don't roll cars off the assembly line and then say, let's add some airbags,
Yeah.
right, for safety. You kind of have to think about those things really early in the process and build it in. Well, I'm curious. So, I've been in the security world as well as software world for a while too. And, if I put sort of my kind of jaded glasses on, I could say, we're doing a lot of the same stuff that, products I built in the early 2000s and generations, variations of that. And sort of where's the new innovation coming? And there's been things happen, but it seems like the software developer world being part of it, blurring the silos of network and security and software and the infrastructure in a way that we have to address it directly.
I mean, it's a unique opportunity to do it right, because if you think about the new stack, it's all code, right? Your first party code. Software is composed, not written, out of open source code, deployed using IAC templates, packaged in containers, deployed on a cloud, which is really code. And so can we take a different approach to security in that context and the process has changed too. Cloud native, digital transformation, all these buzzwords, right? But
Just a way to deliver code.
What it really is, like, we figured out how to do things in a more agile way in the real meaning of the word. Now, terms like DevOps are thrown out. Some people think that, okay, that's also, is it a fad? Is it something else? But I think that it's really about speed. Like, you think about business agility. DevOps was the first step in that transformation. It's dev and ops not working as I build code and toss it over, but working together. So that was a transformation of IT to make that happen. And so now IT is more developers in IT, platform engineers and all that. Next step, security. Security needs to become part of that for DevSecOps to be real, right? And it needs to, that's the transformation. We have an opportunity, and that's the innovation we're focused on, and there's a whole ecosystem of companies that are coming at it that way. Now, I'll tell you what's surprising for me is the other side of this, and especially this week and walking the expo floor and talking about it. There's the other side is, great, here's a new set of problems. Let me take the same old approach, and I'll essentially build a scanner for the cloud. This is a prettier scanner, it does more correlation, it looks better, attack paths, this, that. The risk there is the Christmas tree doesn't need more lights, as one of the CISOs told me. And at the speed at which cloud moves, the next set of lights and the next set of lights, you're throwing it in there, the whole thing is going to fall down, right? It's holiday season coming up. We all did our Christmas trees. Some of us did it, before they left. So it's a timely analogy. That is the risk. The risk is to fall for a trap that loses a generational opportunity to change how we could secure things. And you still need that safety net after the fact, but that should catch very few and far between things, not all the things, and then pushing it back the other way. So I think that's, there's philosophical differences. We come at it saying, opportunity of a lifetime to do it right, because the whole world is code, and can you build it in?
So let's kind of take that, open the hood a little bit and talk about more specifically, how does Snyk do that? What's the approach that you take?
Snyk fundamentally originated with, what does an engineer want? They want to be faster, they want to be more productive. So think about where's code being written, and IDEs. Snyk's able to, in real time, do analysis as developers are writing, instead of the old static analysis that takes a few days, after and before you can ship. This is doing real-time analysis of your code and finding vulnerabilities. It's powered by a security intelligence database that is world-class. Even AWS uses our security intel data. AWS Inspector is powered by it. So, it's kind of the ultimate endorsement that, that you think about, okay, that intelligence is really powerful. But for the dev, it's in their context. So it's teaching them, hey, here's an issue. Here's a recommendation based on all of our machine learning on how these kind of issues are fixed. But if you want to learn more about, cross-site scripting or anything, real time, something called Snyk Learn will teach that So developers are now learning about security, but it's because we're helping them be productive where they live. Next thing, now you're packaging, your dependencies. Well, you don't know what those packages are using underneath. So we make that super easy and like map out the whole dependency graph and everything. And based on that, instead of CVEs and vulnerabilities, we flag the risk of that and the risk levels. And okay, what does a developer do? They do a fix PR, they're merging their code in. Right there, like we will allow them to generate an automatic fix PR. So auto fixing the third party issues. Again, dev productivity with context. And as a product management leader, I always tell, give the developers context, they'll build the best stuff. Don't tell them what to build and how to build. Tell them why, what problem you're trying to solve. So in the same approach we're taking, and just rinse and repeat along all the stages of the modern pipeline. Packaging containers, which image at what layer, what are the issues, here's the best recommended. And by the way, your company might have a custom image for that kind of issues. Here's that one in context as they're doing the work, right? So we live where the developers live, so they don't have to go somewhere else. And we do those things in the workflow that they are actually doing their work, so they don't have to change it. And that's really the, in a nutshell, it's like, what's Sneak's superpower? We help the developers, Formula One fan. We allow them to go around the track faster with, the rules being outside of it, like the guardrails, but not putting speed bumps on the track. So developers love that. So
a really trusted friend of mine said to me recently that when it comes to security products, you can tell what security products have been developed by a developer for developers versus a security product, right? It's very apparent. And I think developers they can kind of sniff out whether you really believe in open source or not. They can tell if it's been created for a developer. And I think your point, the metaphor I think about is, think how far IDEs have come today. Like I use PyCharm, for Python kind of stuff, and it's all right there, right? As you're coding, as you're writing stuff, here's the thing that this could be completed with, kind of like your autocomplete in a word processor, but all of the textual content and your package manager's right there, and you can select, and maybe there's a security rating, something that you can use to decide what you want to use. But it's at the moment of creation. It's not calling for the city inspector after you've already framed the house to find out if they're going to pass it, right?
And the benefits show up for the security team too, right? So they're empowering, but they're able to put policies, they're able to put guardrails. When Log4Shell happened, 92% of our customers fixed it within 48 hours, not found it. The number of people I talked to this week saying Log4Shell was just like painful. It was eye-opening. It's, it took a month. It took, we had to cancel vacations. And so I shared the stat, and they go, "How is that possible?" And I'm like, it is built into how these companies are working. So, that is the power for the security team. Go from being reactionary, but when you need to be reactionary, you also have speed.
I was talking about some of your recent announcements, because you've kind of started developer-centric and then, thought about the bigger environment, the cloud environment.
As I said earlier, we think about cloud as code, and it needs that is the opportunity. So we recently, right before the conference, launched Sneak Cloud. So that's our 5th product in the portfolio. So we have, code, open source, containers, infrastructure as code, and now cloud. But it's really a platform. These are not 5 products. It's like the 1 + 1, plus 1, you get a 10 kind of power in your hands. And it now maps the entire process, and it brings context all the way back. So same thing again. Do we scan? Yeah, there is an assurance, safety net required, but it's not your classic CSPM. It's more application centric. It's giving that IAC engineer who might be platform engineer who might be writing something and a policy that exposes their bucket or some IAM credentials in that context of, that's another, there's an IDE too, right? Give them the context. Like, this issue, based on your cloud configuration and what you're running, is going to cause this kind of exposure. And on the other hand, on the assurance side, okay, here's an issue. What do you do with it? Well, click here. This is the line of IAC code you can fix it in, or here's the best container package you can fix it in, right? To go all the way back. So we're now connecting the whole loop, right? So instead of, it's can't trust but verify. And the way we think about it, code to cloud allows for that loop to be completed. So, and brings the context again all the way back to the person who can best fix it at the moment. And the security team is able to also empower the developers if there is something reactionary that needs to be addressed. They know who to go to. And this is the question I have with all the beautiful UIs and attack paths and this and that. Who does this issue go to? Who fixes this? The developer. Which developer? Who wrote the code? In a modern DevOps shop, you're moving sprint teams, you're moving engineers. You need that to be in that context.
How would they know how to fix it, right? It may not be obviously apparent that this is in my code here or whatever.
And security cannot force it.
Anywhere in that.
It'll break the app, right? Like, so the scanning after the fact approach does not work, even, on the stuff we did previously, right? Mm-hmm. It does not work at all in a modern cloud native application DevSecOps loop. So that's Snyk Cloud, that's why we did it. We don't want to, come at it from a cloud-centric, cloud security, big market, a lot of noise around it, CNAP, CSPM, buzzword bingo going on. Customers don't need more acronyms, more buzzwords. They need an app-centric approach where the cloud issues all the way to the deployment configuration and back can be solved. And it's the exact same approach we took for open source, the exact same approach to code, but now we have connected the whole loop.
So kind of turn your hat around the other way and think about this from a security engineer perspective, right? Yeah. They don't live and breathe the developer's environment, and we're doing that kind of work. So part of that is a bit of a mystery, just like the other way probably is around. How do they accept this kind of approach? Does it look like more, I don't know how this works, but they seem to be doing something that's working for us? Or is it more readily apparent and you can demonstrate how this is making an effect?
And that's the journey, and the trick is even in the word that you use, security engineer. Not somebody who's looking at it from an InfoSec reactionary perspective. But I think that part of this change here is security teams now become more developer aware, security engineering. And if you're having that mindset, and we have work to do to enable them and train them, just like we train the developer. See, developers fundamentally don't understand security issues. They know how to fix their code to make it work, to do what it's doing.
Well, there's too much, there's a lot to know.
There's a lot to know. So it was really making the developer security aware. Mm-hmm. Now it's making security dev aware. And that's that next, phase of the mission that we're in the middle of. But there's a cultural transformation, it's, tools, processes, in-context learning, just like we did for the devs. How do we do it for the security professionals so that they can become more dev aware? Our customers who have kind of made that transition, you'd say, like, what percentage of the world that is in the cloud, is truly cloud native? There's all kinds of data out there. Is it 10%, 15%? We're at the early stages of it, right? And so this is the time to not let old bad habits just move to the new world, but just have the new approach indoctrinated and make that transition to security engineering.
Great. Well, it's been a lot of fun chatting with you. Given you're focused on developer, I know you have a lot of ways that developers can get access and use your technology and kick the tires and try it and work with it. Talk about how folks can access or use what you have to offer.
Yeah, this is the beauty of Snyk. So everything that we talked about, you can go to snyk.io, and we have a free plan, free forever, right? So if you're just a developer who wants to use it for their use, they subscribe to Snyk, and that's how we grew, right? And that's how we continue to, right? Fancy word again for this, PLG. But it's really about give them access, let them use it, and that's the continued philosophy. So, anyone I meet, I say, look, just go try it out. Like, my kids are trying it out. Just early coders. It delights them to see that in context, learning and verification. So. Start there, and if an enterprise wants to adopt it, and that's usually what happens. The biggest of the big companies in the world use, from starting Fortune 1, use Sneak, but usually start with somebody in the dev team who went, found the delight, started using it, and then it spread to the whole company.
The whole DevRel world, democratization of
exactly.
Technology. So, well, good. Hope you've had a great conference, and congrats on the announcements leading up to AWS. Look forward to talking with you again. So, Snyk.io. Snyk spelled a little bit differently. So tell them how.
SNYK. So now you know.
Now you know. Now you know.
So now you know.
Okay. Is that really?
That is it. That is.
So now I know how it got me. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure talking with everybody. Thank you for listening in on AWS reInvent with Techstrong at our studios here in Las Vegas. We look forward to visiting with you on other events as well as other great speakers and topics.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, welcome back. Welcome to reInvent in Las Vegas, reInvent 2022. And we are at our secret location, the Win, in our Techstrong studios here for Techstrong TV. Interviewing some great folks, having some real good conversations, really kind of getting a feel for what's happening, where it's on top of mind for folks, and definitely seeing some trends in that. So I'm very pleased to be joined by Cenk Oldemir, who is cloud and digital leader at Price Waterhouse, correct?
Absolutely. Well, thanks for the invitation.
Yeah.
It's a great conference, 50,000 people, only one place.
Of your closest friend.
Very good, yeah. Very exciting, shoulder to shoulder.
So, I'm interested because, when you work at a company like Price Waterhouse, you can see a lot of different projects and customers and challenges. Same thing here, right? You have a good diversity of lots of companies that work on lots of problems, lots of challenges. What do you see as sort of you're coming here and validating what you've heard from customers? Maybe you've seen some things that might have added to your perspective.
Well, first of all, in my role, I go to many of these conferences. In fact, this is my 9th one this year. The level of excitement at reInvent is incredible. And I think it's because it reminds me of the old days of ERP where there is so much ecosystem built around the cloud. When you go to the show floor, you're going to see hundreds of companies. Some of them you've never heard about, but they play a great role in building this next-gen architecture. So, one thing that's pretty clear is massive interest, super high energy, and building of a very large ecosystem around the cloud architecture, infrastructure, SaaS layer, security, everything around it is developing at a lightning speed. So it's very exciting to see.
Yeah, it isn't just one thread. It's all of it, horizontal, three-dimensional, right?
Yes.
Somebody just today described it, and I went to the first reInvent so I can relate to it. It's kind of, earlier it's more about the IT, organization, IT admin, infrastructure person. Today it's about builders. And yes, it's about people in those folks that are in new roles like SRE or platform engineering or, taking kind of just admin to DevOps or whatever it might be. But it made me think about, it really is people who are kind of building out their part of that puzzle, whether they're a software developer or, they're a DevOps engineer.
Absolutely. I think one thing that's interesting, when you look at the early days of the mainframe and client server wave, right? One thing that's very different now is the AWS and other hyperscalers are not just infrastructure. There is so much. In fact, when you look at the keynote today, there was multiple announcements of what we call the packaged innovation in the cloud. So that's one thing that's very different. So what you're seeing is not just a new infrastructure you move your stuff to with high level of flexibility and agility, and that's not just it. And that's actually the main topic around. There's a lot of talk around value out of cloud. In fact, we've done our cloud survey. A majority of the people talk about value out of cloud because although a lot of migrations happened, everybody moved their data and apps to the cloud, especially running in containers, and they say, well, we're not getting any value because the real value story is going to be complete when you modernize those applications, meaning get out of the containers and attach them to all the microservices that are available to you. And then the second wave, I think, is going to actually be radically increasing the value curve. Is we have a lot of clients that have their front office and middle office written 20, 30 years ago, old legacy companies. So all those applications, when they have to be re-platformed, right? First, technically, they have to be rewritten with cloud native technologies. Second, when our clients rewrite those applications, they're going to actually do it as a transformation program, looking at processes, data, operating models. So
in a very different way.
We see that as the real unlock of the value versus just, hey, I moved everything and where's the value?
Right. I mean, your point about it isn't just another data center, someone else's data center that's
Absolutely
much bigger. It's a whole suite of services and layers of things that you use as part of your
100%.
infrastructure and your apps. I'm curious because the big choice in modernization, right? The debate of, is it lift and shift? Is it lift and shift with some modification?
That's
or is it, that's just a step on the way to changing the whole thing to cloud native? It seems like it's kind of gone back and forth. Of, yeah, we want to be all cloud native. Well, that's really hard. Maybe we don't. But what's your read on where we are in that really adopting cloud?
Well, a very interesting question, because I think I had about 12 meetings since yesterday with different clients. Because we as consultants, we also test our theories and hypotheses with our clients and with our partners like AWS. One thing that is very important and everybody has to think about is, I think the cloud revolution started as a cost play. Shut down your data center and move to the cloud. It's cheaper, it's more capable, it's flexible. But now, some of that has been done without a full end-to-end plan to look at which data, which workloads should sit where. Okay, and that's a very critical point, because that kind of an upfront cloud strategy and cloud planning, it's not just technical, it's also functional and it's industry specific. If you have moved everything up, then realize that maybe some certain applications should be either on-premise or on the edge. That type of planning is causing the confusion you're describing, because what our clients are recognizing is, hey, I got some things, like if you have large amount of imaging and things like that, your storage costs may not be feasible to move to the cloud, right? So doing that planning, right, upfront and figure out what sits where is going to avoid that confusion. Otherwise, there is a huge risk of what we call creating legacy in the cloud. And I think what that's going to cause is this vacillation of complexity. Because when you really think about it, most of our clients will be multi-cloud by nature. How? It doesn't necessarily mean it's AWS plus Azure plus GCP. Well, SAP is going on cloud. Oracle runs on cloud. Salesforce. So there is a huge risk of overcomplication, because what happens if your company is sitting on 7 clouds? Now you have multi-cloud orchestration problems. You have data syncing problems. You have security going across multiple clouds. You have issues of what's the real source of data issues. So what we're thinking about is, convincing our clients to do a thorough enterprise level cloud strategy first before you're executing all these different moves. And what that strategy would also help is a good level of consumption planning, because value out of the cloud is also not just running stuff in containers, but hey, I might have bought some overconsumption. So what we're trying to do is build that strategy correctly, help our clients figure out which workloads should sit where for the appropriate use case. And then from there, make sure that they understand how to set up, let's not call it simple, but let's call it the appropriately complex architectures, so that the computing and the value going forward is going to be in line with the expectations.
Well, I think one of the habits we also have, and so I would contribute to your strategy session, or maybe you've already got it plugged in, is not everything needs to move at the same pace of innovation.
Yes.
Like I might need to modernize my inventory application.
100%.
And I want to do massive things with it because that drives my business. But versus this logistics planning application that's kind of good and we don't really have to invest a lot in it. I don't really want to do a ton of things to that. Though I may want to make, go into cloud native or maybe not, but it's also planning that dimension to say, what part of the business do we really want to accelerate? We need to be nimble and fast or innovate in market.
100%. And I think this is, you can even use the term like there's a tech transformation.
Mm-hmm.
There is a business transformation with a small t and a big T. What this cloud move gives you that opportunity to do it in those different types. And I think that's where that planning comes into play. But I mean, look, it's, when you talk to AWS, they will tell you that they're just getting started. Whatever the ratio is, it's probably middle to high teens where all the workloads in the universe have moved to the cloud. So I think there's a lot of learnings both on the hyperscaler side as well as the companies and client side. And I think that in the next 2-3 years, as this wave accelerates, I see a more conscientious thinking around, right, on how do I use this innovation out there? And while I'm spending all this money, how do I transform myself and create new customer channels, create new paths to growth, and not just do an infrastructure move?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Not just retool.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
The stack of the application.
That's right.
Because it's interesting, too, we talk about multi-cloud. You buy 3 companies, they all may be on Amazon with you. There's 4 clouds inside Amazon.
That's right.
Right. I mean, they're different, the infrastructure,
Right.
all parts of it. So even that is a challenge that, you can be with one provider, one hyperscaler, but not necessarily be, uniform or consistent across
100%.
places that you're using it.
100%. But I mean, there's other trends in the cloud, right? One thing is we as PricewaterhouseCoopers, we're looking at our heritage of business consulting and technology consulting. It automatically makes us think about industry and function. So the dimension of industry in the cloud is still developing. And most likely it's going to develop pretty fast. There's still some concepts of industry clouds being talked about and developed. But this is something that's going to be very interesting to watch because there's some experiments out there around some of the providers like Snowflake around, like if you're in the same industry, can we share some of the data? And I turn on some data you can see, so I can see the same data from you. It's not IP driven, but it helps all of us. Those kind of concepts are going to continue to develop. And I think that our clients are looking for industry specifics, both on the cloudification of ERPs, SaaS, as well as cloud capabilities. So, while we talked about this, innovation or transforming yourself by modernizing in cloud native development, I think the whole industry angle or industrialization of the cloud content, both apps and data, is going to be a very interesting thing to watch. I think, hyperscalers are going to get into it because it will increase consumption. And our clients are going to be very interested in it because it gives them agility, flexibility, and new innovation, right, that they're looking for. So that is probably like a cloud 2.5. Right now we're on cloud 2.0, right? Maybe 2.5, 2.6. So that's something that's important to watch. What happens to that? First maybe experiments, but then them becoming, industry standard capabilities that are provided by either ERPs or the cloud, and it's going to all probably merge at some point.
Kind of new models, new business
new business models, new sharing models. I think these are all being, discussed in different ways depending on who you talk to.
Great. Wasn't fun talking with you, Cenk. What would you like folks to be able to go check out? Is it learn about the cloud strategy?
Well, look, at PwC, we're making a big investment in the cloud, especially industry clouds, as well as what we call the Beyond Migration Agenda, which we think is the unlock. So watch us, follow us, pay attention to us, and there's a lot to come.
Good, a lot of good stuff. Cenk Ozdemir from Pricewaterhouse.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for coming, man.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
This is Techstrong TV.
I'm Bonnie Schneider with Techstrong TV, and we are talking about AWS Accelerator in Clean Energy. Joining me now, we have Damien Bowie and Olin Legond, and I thank you both gentlemen for joining me. First, if we could talk a little bit about the AWS Clean Energy Accelerator. Damien, if you'd like to talk a little bit about that, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Firstly, it's very nice to meet you, Bonnie. Thanks very much for having us on. I really appreciate it. The AWS Clean Energy Accelerator is an accelerator that was created in 2021 to be able to support mature startups that are addressing decarbonisation at scale across the energy sector. As with most things within AWS, we like to work backwards from the customer. And over the years, we've been hearing the same thing from two very distinct customer classes. One was our large energy players that were looking for solutions to be able to go after some of the harder challenges that they had. And the other one was from our startup community that wanted more access to market through our large energy engagements. And so we thought there was an incredible opportunity for us to pair those two areas together. We launched the first cohort of 12 startups in 2021. We followed that up in 2022 with an additional 12 startups in Lisbon. Shifted Energy was one of the startups that was within our cohort. And then at COP27 last year, we announced our AWS Clean Energy Accelerator 3.0, which was an expansion of the programs we'd had on the previous years. That was going to have two cohorts this year in 2023. And we were going to focus in on sort of 6 key areas within this clean energy space around advanced materials, energy storage, hydrogen, grid modernization, energy security and resilience, and CCUS, and to be able to further support the industry as a whole.
It's a wonderful program. And Olin, I know that you're participating in it with Shifted Energy. Can you talk about what this experience has been like so far? And really, what is your feeling about just even being one of the companies, the few companies that were selected to be part of this exciting program?
Yeah, thanks for having us on, Bonnie. It's really humbling for us. We're based in Hawaii, where we have some of the hardest problems to solve. We're island grids. And so from that perspective, we're grateful because we actually need the help. We're far ahead of many other communities with the amount of renewables that we bring on and the amount of complexity that we have to solve for. And so this is really truly an accelerator. So it's a jam-packed program. We were put into the realm sort of to talk to corporates and see what their needs are, really getting closer to developing and deploying at scale at commercial than it was like, for example, just going through pilots. And so this program really helped us accelerate our path to commercialization. And the other thing that we got from Amazon was help on the tech side as well, too, because when you want to deploy at scale, you have to have an unlimited amount of capacity to develop and deliver these solutions. And so we got that with Amazon. And I'm proud to announce that since we developed, we have landed a few large customers as a result of this program.
Oh, that's really good news. And Damien, how did you decide on which company? I mean, you probably had some incredible applicants. How did you narrow it down?
Yeah, look, we look at a couple of key criteria. You know, we want mature startups. So we're looking for startups in this space that have either gone through or are going through at least a round A. So they've got funding in place themselves. We're looking for them to have at least one secured customer. So they've got some revenue coming in, so they've got a capability to scale from. And then within that, really, we're looking at the dynamics of customers that would really have the capabilities to leverage this experience to really be able to support our customers as a whole.
That's interesting. So when it came to Shifted Energy, Olin, you mentioned about the technology, how partnering, being part of this accelerator has been so helpful. Can you kind of give us some details on that? Where have you been able to get that support from this program?
Yeah, sure. So we use advanced machine learning. And so the ability to work directly with Amazon support to tweak our systems, to tweak how we can scale it even more. Some of these processes take a lot of computing power. And so the ability to trim that down. And so we went from about a six-fold increase in efficiency in our algorithms working with the team. And so that just results in us allowing our services to be cheaper to our utilities that purchase these machine learning-based systems.
That's great. And for this, the Clean Energy Accelerator, are things, in your opinion, Damien, going on schedule? What are you looking for, as we go into this new year, new expectations ahead?
We're really excited. So, we launched the AWS Clean Energy Accelerator 3.0, as I mentioned, in COP27. And we've just closed the round of that. So we're expanded out. We're going to have 2 cohorts this year. We closed the applications on the 9th of January, so just early in January. And we're going to announce the finalists of that group around about the 6th of March, so in time for Sarah Week. We're going to launch the first cohorts of that group in May in Seattle. And then we're going to finish it actually with an innovation showcase at COP28 in Dubai to be able to bring that together in front of the larger customer class. So yeah, it's incredibly on track. We've got incredible amounts of momentum both internally within AWS and within the community to move it forward. And we're continuing to be excited by it.
That's great. And Olin, can you explain a little bit more about what you were talking about being based in Hawaii and the challenges that you face there with energy, and a little more about your company and what your goals are?
Yeah, sure. So we're the most energy independent. We're the most energy dependent state in the country. So we import almost all of our fossil fuels. Like in the last 10 years, we imported 1/3 of our oil from Russia, for example. And so we do rely a lot on fossil fuels. And so we're transitioning. We're the first state in the country to commit to a 100% clean energy future. So by law, we're going to get to 100% clean energy. And what I liked about this program is that Amazon is really open to considering equity. So in our company, what we do is there's a lot of programs for single family homeowners, like renters, aren't able to change their appliances or get an EV for EV charging or put solar. And so we support these underserved communities by putting these like non-traditional programs together. So we're really grateful that Amazon recognized that and helping us scale in these underserved communities to bring these programs out to not just families that can afford it and own a home, but to renters or people who live in an apartment building, for example.
That's a great point. Do you think, Damien, was that something that the accelerator program was sort of looking for companies that were addressing equity?
Not at all. It's really not a requirement. There's no requirement for actually Amazon to be able to commit equity. There's also not a requirement for the systems and platforms to be running on AWS at all. What we're really looking at doing is to be able to identify technologies that meet an addressable need for our customers, and then bring in that level of support to be able to allow these customers to scale. Olin mentioned a couple of key aspects of this program in itself. It's an intensive program, so it typically runs, in person and virtually over a 12-week program. We bring in industry experts, that have real experience within the energy space, around digital transformations, investment, public policy, innovation at scale. As Olin mentioned as well, we bring in some of our cloud experts. If you're building on AWS, we can show you what you need to do to be able to scale that and keep the costs under control as well. And then what we also do is to be able to provide clear metrics so that you become an easier integrator into some of these larger energy customers as well. It's an end-to-end experience that we're very, very proud of, and we're getting some really good success out of it as well.
That sounds great. And Olin, as you look towards this year, we were talking about some of the goals that you're facing. Climate tech in general is just getting so much talk in the news, and everyone is looking for reliable, renewable energy sources. Where do you think that shifted energy sort of comes into the focus when we're talking about the global efforts that are going on right now to shift to renewable energy?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Bonnie. So for example, if you bring in a lot of solar and the solar energy is available from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. only in your community, what do you do with the excess? How do you add more solar? So that's where we come in. So we're able to shift a lot of that solar usage to later on when there are no available solar capacity. And so that's a huge advantage to communities, that you need to have a quiver of tools to get to 100% clean energy. And so we're just one of those tools. So we do a lot of these clean energy shifts.
That's interesting. Damien, for the AWS Clean Energy Accelerator, Why is it important for AWS to be specifically targeting clean energy? What is the initiative behind that?
Right. So I work within a dedicated business group that just focuses on the energy industry as a whole. Within that business group, we look at traditional oil and gas, we look at power and utilities, and we focus on the energy transition, which is the part of the business that I lead. And what we're really looking at doing is to be able to help our customers scale into that space and address critical challenges that they have across their business. We know that all of our customers can't do this alone. We need to be able to create an ecosystem of partners to come along with that. And the Clean Energy Accelerator is one of our mechanisms, one of many mechanisms actually, that we have at AWS and Amazon to be able to support and accelerate into this space.
So when it comes to technology and the challenges that you've had to face, Olin, can you talk a little bit more about what, as long as you've had this company going, what have you faced in recent times with the challenges, and how has AWS helped you meet that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So cybersecurity is a huge issue. And so one huge benefit we get is Amazon has some of the best cybersecurity policies and technologies and stacks out there. And it starts with our devices. So our devices can be secured all the way to the end user accessing our systems. And so that is one benefit. And we can do this in country too. So we're in Australia, and we can use Amazon, for example, to put our systems in Australia to meet those strict cybersecurity laws that are in ever present and growing. So that's one advantage we have.
Has there been any challenges, though, that you've been facing as well? That you mentioned cybersecurity. What about in terms of getting the supplies that you're mentioning about the solar energy? Some people will say, well, you only have sun from a certain amount of time. We also, due to climate change, have more extreme weather events that's affecting our cloud coverage and things like that. So how are you accommodating those other concerns?
Yeah, it's a good question. So our company doesn't produce the renewable energy, so we manage it. And there's more than enough for us to manage. So that is not one of our challenge fronts, but we do face the challenge of just getting our costs down. So in every country, cost is a major consideration. And so the ability to use cloud infrastructure and the ability to use that correctly and the right tools is a requirement in this space.
And we find that, Bonnie, very consistent across the industry as well. So many of the customers that we're working with are really looking at taking these problems at scale. Many of them have done a demonstration or a proof of concept to be able to address some of the critical issues that you'd mentioned with regard to having, limited amounts of energy available from solar or from wind or from storage or a complement of assets. We're looking at building solutions, then building the capabilities to be able to scale those solutions out globally so that they can meet, the broader environmental challenges that are being faced by most of our organizations today.
That's interesting. It really seems like a perfect combination coming together to fight the climate crisis and create these new opportunities in clean energy. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me on Techstrong TV. I wish you both the best, and we'll be following the progress through 2023. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bonnie. Much appreciated.
Thanks. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
I'm Bonnie Schneider for Techstrong TV, and joining me now is Oliver Bolton. He is the CEO of Earthly. Oliver is joining me from London, and it's really a fascinating story about how Earthly got started and where it really stands in this emerging field of climate technology. Oliver, thanks for joining me, and I'd love to hear more about Earthly.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And so Earthly is a platform that connects businesses with high integrity, high quality, nature-based solutions. And, our typical customer might be a company that's committed to net zero, or a company that wants to become regenerative and give back more to the planet than they need to take to exist. And so, yeah, we support businesses, looking to protect and restore our planet.
So how does it work? How does the platform start from beginning to end for the user?
Yeah, so typically our larger customers come to us and they've already looked at their carbon analytics and they already know their carbon footprint, and they've typically worked on reduction strategies. So they come to us with a very specific kind of need to support a nature-based project for a certain amount of tons. And so what we do is we find projects that align with their values in the geographies that are relevant to them. We connect them with the projects, and then we help them monitor the progress of the projects over time, and then we share back information about the stories linked to those projects that they can then share with their stakeholders and community.
What about the visualization tools? How can someone sort of get an idea of exactly what's happening with their nature-based solution that they're looking to give back towards?
So one of the challenges that we've identified is actually nature's quite abstract. And you talk about 1 million trees that's being planted, and it sounds great, but we find it hard to comprehend exactly what that looks like. So we've developed a 3D island, and on that island is a 3D visualization of the projects that you've supported. So there might be a rainforest project, a kelp seaweed, a regenerative farmland, a bit of grassland, and that's represented on the island. And the more that you support a project, the larger it grows, and the larger the island grows. So suddenly it's a really kind of emotive and engaging way to see and follow your progress and support of nature over time.
That's really interesting, because you're right. Obviously, if you're planting trees, it takes a lifetime to really see the results of that. How did you come up with that idea of creating an island for the project?
I think it's really about, it's creating a visual tool that people can be really proud of. And typically what happens is people invest in projects and then they kind of forget about them. Whereas with the island, the investment always stays on there. And so you have this kind of scenario where you want to add to it, and you want to grow your island, and you want to show a sense of progress. And, it just helps accelerate, investments into these projects, and, takes people on your nature investment journey. And we've had some really positive feedback from the customers that are using it.
And do you find that obviously climate tech is such an emerging area? So many people are in the sustainability space and they want to be in it. So how have you been able to keep up with demand and interest in Earthly?
Yeah, I mean, we have, with any marketplace, we're constantly speaking to projects, and we're making sure we have supply. But one of the tools that we developed is a quality assessment tool. So we can screen nature-based projects looking at the carbon, biodiversity, and social impacts. And we found automated ways to do this. And what it's meant is that we constantly have a pipeline of high quality, high integrity projects sort of coming through that have been mapped out that we can then offer to the businesses that we're working with. And, as we've grown up our clients, we've grown the projects we're working with, and we're kind of building up both sides of the marketplace at the same time.
And how are you made aware of the projects, since so many are happening around the world?
Yeah, we have a research team who are constantly exploring and discovering. We have a lot of the projects that are now approaching us as we're kind of building up a reputation. We have a scientific board of 8 experts who are recommending projects to us. But one of the main tools that we use is we have a machine learning Python script that screens the public registries of registries like Vera. And they look for certain keywords and data points and create shortlists of what we believe are high quality projects. And then we then go through and we conduct our more detailed project quality assessment on those shortlists.
Is that machine learning, was that something that you started once the company got going, or is that something that you out of the gate, you figured this is how we're going to do it?
Yeah, no, we built that over the last 12 months. So we started 2 years ago, and it started off much more manual, and we've automated processes sort of over time as we've grown.
Yeah, there really is a lot of automation. Every company's looking to become more digital in what they're doing. When the clients are coming to you and they're looking for an investment in nature and they want to make a difference, is there one particular area that is attracting them more than others?
I think we're seeing more and more companies come to us with biodiversity being a key focus, and so looking beyond carbon, which is really exciting. Increasingly, we also have those that are looking at the social side, and so like female empowerment has been a big sort of trend area for us. But what's great is that people are kind of looking at the full picture, and ultimately businesses want to make sure they're investing in these high quality projects that are going to survive and thrive, over the decades ahead, with sort of locked in changing weather to be expected in the years ahead.
You mentioned the automation that you're doing now. Is there anything going forward that you would like to do and become a little more in the digital space with Earthly that you're not doing now?
Yeah, I mean, we have an API which allows customers to integrate nature investments sort of within their business models, connected to sales or to be used as rewards. And so we have plans to kind of expand that out and to to have a more intelligent API that can also show like granular co-benefits from the projects. That might be minutes of education or injections delivered to a local community linked to an investment. So that's something that we're planning to map out further. And again, with the 3D visualization, we want to support more interventions, and we want to really kind of evolve that experience so you can explore the projects within that 3D environment. So we're spending a lot of time looking at kind of WebGL technologies and working out how we can kind of really push the bar in that area.
That is interesting. And I'd like to talk a little bit also about your background, because you're an entrepreneur. And what drove you to this space for climate tech? Why did you decide this is where I want to put my energy?
I think for me, I've been an entrepreneur for 15 years now, and I think, which is all my career. And for me, I actually took my previous business through the B Corp process back in 2015, and it was a founding UK B Corp, and that really opened up my eyes for structuring a business for impact and for purpose. And with Earthly, I really wanted to create a company that had purpose at the heart of what it was doing. And it was around the time of the birth of my son, where the real kind of catalyst for me was thinking about future conversations with him. And at the same time, I was kind of aware of the situation we were in with regards to climate and biodiversity. And I kind of imagined this future conversation where he would challenge me and say, look, Dad, you knew the severity of the situation. What did you do? And that really kind of triggered me and inspired me to dedicate the rest of my career to having an impact in climate and biodiversity.
That's really great. And the people that are coming to you to use Earthly, do you find that they have a similar sentiment to that?
Yeah, it's a question I always ask, like, what are their drivers for investing in nature? And sometimes it's climate leadership. It's a personal passion from the CEO linked to the company. Sometimes it's our competitors are doing this, or we have pressure from our customers. So. But increasingly as well, like, what companies are seeing is investing into nature can also have a return on investment, whether that's increased sales, whether it's increased engagement, whether that's customer, employee acquisition or retention. And I think that's going to be the lever that's going to unlock, this and engage the mass market mainstream companies who can understand not only is this the right thing to do, but actually it makes commercial sense as well. So really hoping that can be a lever to take things to the next level.
That's great. For the projects that you mentioned, have you seen in just the short time that you've been doing it, any technological advances in how, let's say, a biodiversity project is being conducted, or how we're trying to reduce waste of natural resources? Just from your own impression, since you're sort of overseeing and you have an eye on so much that's happening globally, what have you seen in the technology space that's advancing this cause?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's three things to call out, and the first will be no surprise here is all of the geospatial technological advances that we're seeing. But specifically for biodiversity, the two areas that we're most excited about are firstly eDNA, which is where you can take a water or a soil sample and you can actually see the species and the creatures within a 10-mile radius from that sample that are sort of in the vicinity. And if you take samples on a periodic basis, you can see if there's an increase or a decline in biodiversity. And then the other area, which is really fascinating, is bioacoustics, which is essentially strapping a microphone to a tree and listening to the insects, listening to the keystone species, the birds, the bats. And again, you can track over time and see if they increase or decrease. And I think those two technologies, and we have pilots running with project partners this year, are really exciting. And we're keen to bring in as much monitoring and verification that we can with the projects we're working with.
That is so interesting, especially the bioacoustics that you mentioned. And I say that because people are, whether they're using their apps or at home, they listen to sounds of nature. So you always have the sound of the ocean or the sound of a forest or a natural fireplace. I wonder if that's going to be the next thing, the sound of the trees. the birds and the bees out there. No.
I think, no, look, within us, I think it stirs up some kind of primordial sort of instinctual kind of reaction with us. And again, as completely as you said, the sounds that we're recording, we're looking at then porting that through into the 3D island. But it's with the bioacoustics fascinating because you get that ongoing monitoring and you get the morning dawn chorus of birds, and it's amazing technology, and we're really excited to be working right at the forefront of biodiversity monitoring.
So is Earthly, you're the CEO of Earthly, are you working on any other projects in the climate tech space?
No, I'm dedicated 100% to this project, and as I said, committed the remainder of my career to this space. And we have a 1 gigaton goal for 2030, so removing a gigaton of carbon via nature, and so that's the big focus for us, and we're on a path to achieving that. So just keeping our head down and looking to grow the businesses we work with and grow the projects that we work with, and push the bar with regards to project quality and project integrity, help other projects sort of improve the way that they're doing things, and maximize the good that we can do.
And speaking of growth, when we're looking at the tech field, 2022 and even the start of 2023, we've seen a lot of layoffs at tech companies. But it seems to be more of a need for tech workers in this climate and sustainability space. And I was wondering what's your opinion on that, and if you do see that as a growing trend?
Yeah, I think, look, climate tech has been less affected than other sort of tech areas. And I think that's perhaps recognition, firstly, of the fact this is a huge problem that isn't going away. But I think, secondly, from our perspective, the larger corporates that we're working with, they've made public commitments, and, they need to adhere to those public commitments. And so, that means that, we're focusing on how can we get access to high quality projects at fair pricing. And, and I think there's the understanding of the severity of the biodiversity and climate crisis has helped keep focus and momentum within the sector.
Well, Oliver, this is really fascinating what you're doing at Earthly, and I think it's connecting with nature as an investment, and also the technology that's emerging from this process. It seems that that's another way that's drawing people in and getting them more involved and wanting to invest responsibly. So, Oliver Bolton, CEO of Earthly, thank you so much for joining me on Techstrong TV. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey folks, we're at the AWS reInvent show. We're talking to Adam Wilson, who's a senior vice president with Alteryx, and we're talking about the convergence of Alteryx and Trifacta that they acquired last February, I think it was.
Yeah.
And we're also going to have a chat about the democratization of data management and how all this is coming together with business intelligence. Adam, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I don't think everybody knows who Trifacta was, and I'm not sure even everybody knows who Alteryx is. So why don't you kind of walk us through exactly what 2 + 2 = 5 here, and how that all comes together?
Yeah. No, it's been super fun and super exciting. So back in February, Alteryx announced the acquisition of Trifacta, and now Trifacta has come in as the as the underlying cloud platform for all of the Alteryx Analytics Cloud. And what that's going to do is to really take a lot of the ideas around self-service data preparation as well as end user analytics and make that broadly available to a much larger set of constituents. And so Alteryx has over 8,000 customers, hundreds of thousands of users who've been using the product very successfully on the desktop over the past 20 years or so. And now we're taking this story in a big way to cloud. And Trifacta is excited to be part of that. So it's a lot of fun for us to get to do this now on a much bigger stage and to be part of this trend that you're seeing where everyone's focused on trying to help enable the people who know the data best to do more of the work. So.
Well, and exactly what do we mean by self-service? Because it used to be as an end user, I'd call up the IT department and I'd be like, hey guys, I need this amount of data, and they'd be like, we'll get back to you in about 3 months or so. And by the time they got that together, I forgot what I was caring about and what the question was and what the issue was. So what will be the role of IT teams as we go forward if we have more self-service, and how does that self-service come about?
Yeah, no, I think it's really interesting because it's shifting the dynamic, right? So you have this impedance mismatch where you often in most organizations have thousands of users who are being told to be more data-driven. And you have a very small group of people who historically have been in a position to provision the data that they need in order to actually fulfill that mandate. And so now what we're trying to do is to flip this around and to say, why is it that people who know the data best can't do this work on their own? Can we turn this into a user experience challenge powered by machine learning that helps automate the most complicated stuff so that end users who are not necessarily structured programmers can get in and can do more of this on their own? So the nice part is now we can learn from the data and we can learn from how the user interacts with the data in order to speed up the process of going from raw to refined. And that actually takes a lot of burden off of IT who we're finding that they had backlogs of requests coming from the line of business that they couldn't fulfill. So now they can hand this work to the end users. The nice part is the end users are going to thank them for giving them that work, and that frees IT up to crowdsource the best stuff, to focus on the governance and controls around how data then gets moved into production and gets used across the enterprise, as well as to source new and interesting data sets that could be brought in, that could be used by the line of business and the analysts in order to create new and interesting data products that might drive the business forward.
Do you think as a result that maybe we'll get better data? Because one of the dirty little secrets of IT is that, well, most end users don't trust the data because they know who entered it. It was them. And they didn't really put a lot of effort into it because to them it was a chore. So are we going to get to the point now where the quality of the data will improve because the people creating it are the same people using it, and they'll be like, well, man, this matters to me.
Yeah. I think this is a really interesting topic because people have realized that if their data quality is bad, then their analytics and their AI are probably worthless. And can you imagine a state where we start automating more bad decisions faster based on bad data? So this is creating a burning platform for companies to take data quality much more seriously. So I do think that, again, when you give the data to the users who understand how it gets used to make business decisions, that naturally is going to create that shining bright light into dark corners often that will allow us to start to standardize and clean up a lot of this data. The other thing, though, that I think is really powerful, and one of the new capabilities that we introduced, is something called adaptive data quality. And what we mean by that is why, as the data volumes get bigger, as the data diversity gets bigger, it's hard for a human being to upfront understand all of the validation and data quality logic that they would want to apply to do checks. So why can't the data sets suggest their own rules? Like, why can't we let the machines do the work at scale and come back and say, hey, here are things we see in the data that you might want to establish safeguards or rails around in order to ensure that you get sort of better quality analytics coming out of the data. And so that sort of AI-assisted approach, we think, is going to be more and more pervasive, not just for data quality, but for data integration, as well as for just analytics more generally, where the AI helps suggest the analytics that you should be paying attention to.
We've been tilting at this business intelligence windmill for the better part of 2 decades now, and I go into an office and I still see spreadsheets everywhere, and I shake my head. So what will get people off of this spreadsheet addiction that they currently have and move to something that is fundamentally a better application, and yet everybody still runs around and uses a spreadsheet?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. We did a study recently with IDC that said that over 50% of people in organizations have access to no more sophisticated tools than a spreadsheet when it comes to analytics. So not surprising, right? And I think that what you're finding is that more and more organizations are realizing that if you can take more of a platform-centric approach, and for us that's the Alteryx Analytics Cloud platform, where you can start to now bring together different constituents where you've got data engineers, you've got business analysts, you've got data scientists who are all collaboratively curating data together. It creates a force multiplying effect for the organization, because now everybody's not sort of on their own island manipulating data in their own way, but you're actually leveraging the power of the cloud in order to do this in a way that's going to allow more technical users to work with less technical users who have more business context in order to get to kind of better data products faster. And we think that's a winning formula, and you're starting to really see, as more and more of the data gravity shifts to the cloud, you're starting to see more and more of that happening in enterprises at scale.
How smart will these apps get? You mentioned AI. Do we get to the point where maybe I'll walk into the office one day and it'll tell me, here's the 3 things you'd likely get fired for, and you should go do something about this? Or how much do I need to know to ask the question versus how much can the thing tell me what question to ask?
Yeah, well, one of the offerings that's in the Alteryx Analytics Cloud that we're particularly excited about is an offering called Auto Insights. And rather than building static dashboards or reports that get passed around, the idea here is exactly this, which is we're going to introspect the data and we're going to come back and say, hey, given what we see going on in the data, here are some things we think you might want to pay attention to. And so, for us, this is really exciting because now it's starting to really put the power in the hands of the end users to then go in and not sort of start from scratch and not consume things in a static way, especially as the data is constantly changing, but you're able to keep up with the analytics as they're changing, and the system itself, again, reveals what might be the most interesting trends, patterns, causal relationships, correlations, and things that that when you walk in and sit down, allows you to focus your time and attention on those areas.
Now we have all this data that sits in these databases, and we used to hire these people. I called them SQL jockeys. They used to sit there and come up with all these great queries and come back and give you a result.
Yeah.
What happens to all those people if we're going to self-service our own needs and the end users are doing all the querying? What's their role? What becomes of them?
Yeah, no, and I think that let me give you an example of how this played out at one of our large financial services customers. So this is one of the largest banks on the planet. They have a group of quants that split roughly equally between fixed income and equities. They had about 300 to 400 of these individuals that are constantly looking for algorithms that they can trade on. There was a group within IT that was supporting them that was roughly 10 people. So you can imagine the backlog of work that they had, because these quants are constantly trying to stitch together data in new and interesting ways in order to gain some advantage in the market. And so the backlog measured in years, can't hire your way out of that because they don't have the budget to just hire tons and tons of additional people. Also really hard to find those skills. So what they said was, what we're going to do is we're going to open up raw zones in our data lake, and we're going to allow a lot of interactive experimentation. We're going to put the data in there, let the quants go after the data, do that in a self-service way. And then the minute they actually create training data that births an algorithm, now we're going to get back involved. And now we're going to say, hey, we'll help you operationalize this at scale, because if we're going to make multi-million-dollar trading decisions, we want to know, where did that data set come from that trained that algorithm? How was it transformed along the way? Who touched it? Because now we have to have full audit trail and chain of custody on what happened with that data. And so now a lot of the governance, the control, the reuse, all being done by that smaller IT organization, but allowing these guys to run much faster because they can do it in a self-service way. And in that game, if you're a little faster, you don't just win a little more. You win all of it for some period of time until the market catches up with whatever insights or algorithms you've created. And so that becomes a really powerful, not just operational efficiency story, but a really powerful top line business growth story. The other thing that the IT organization said to us as we implemented this is they said, then we're also in a better position to go out and really find other interesting data sets that we could bring in that these guys could start to spend time with. So that's government data, that's dark data, that's data from data brokers, it's data that's littered all over the inside of the organization that they can start to bring together. So it just elevates the strategic nature of their role rather than forcing them to spend all their time, building pipelines in response to, requirements that are coming over the wall.
How do I validate the data sets? Because as one wag once said, it's one thing to be wrong, it's another thing to be wrong at scale.
Yeah.
How do I kind of know that the data is reliable, and especially if I'm bringing in this third-party stuff and I'm comparing, contrasting, what's my level of confidence in the data?
Yeah, well, and that's where you're seeing this massive trend around observability, where people are starting to say, okay, first step was, can I sort of find where I have data assets or where I can get them together? Then can I start to integrate them, and can I do that at scale now across a much broader set of users and use cases? But very quickly, this burning platform around understanding the quality, understanding how the data may evolve or change, because just because you find a data source and get your pipelines created and start to do your analytics doesn't mean that that data isn't going to shift or drift in some fashion, whether that's the actual schema or whether that's the data itself. So putting in place a lot of monitoring, a lot of controls, a lot of checks that ensure that those things are detected, and that people can respond to them efficiently has become kind of the next frontier for competition, I think, in this market, because that's what the end users are saying is they start to really think about really the data products driving their business and allowing them to cater to long tail segments in their market or to manage and model risk better. That's the thing that's really going to I think separate a lot of the successful companies as we go forward, from those that really haven't figured out how to harness a lot of the data they have under management. So,
you mentioned competition. What differentiates Alteryx from everybody else? There's no shortage of BI and analytics applications out there. So, what should people be looking for?
Yeah. Well, and I think that from our perspective, this really is about tapping into what's going on, in the line of business, with the people who are making the business decisions, right? So I think, the hallmark of the company from the very beginning was, getting this technology into the hands of the end users and truly democratizing what was historically a very technical, very expensive problem. So we talk a lot about analytics automation, and we talk a lot about doing that for the end users who are not, again, necessarily structured programmers, but live in data every day, are incredibly data driven. They're more likely to look like someone that's an accountant or someone that's a financial analyst than they are someone who is a computer science graduate. And so I think that's allowed the company to, now approaching $1 billion in revenue, grew 75% last quarter in revenue. Over several 100,000 users across 8,000 accounts. This has been a very successful organization that ultimately is starting to now think about cloud as an amplifying effect on everything all the success that we've had historically on the desktop. And so I think as we start to bring that together across democratizing machine learning, democratizing what I called the sort of auto insights, or some of those analytic insights, as well as democratizing what has historically been an ETL process, bringing all that together in Alteryx Analytics Cloud gives everyone a unified approach at a time when the market is really saying, listen, we're trying to figure out how to do more with less. We're trying to figure out how to automate more things. We're trying to figure out whether what's going on right now in our business is the economy or is it us, right? And so they're looking for a unified platform in order to do that, and a platform that they can cost effectively deploy and scale across their entire organization. And that's where we're trying to get people to sort of lift their heads up from just being inside of spreadsheets all the time and starting to sort of think about this in a new way. And that has really, again, been a lot of what has resulted in the success of the company.
All right. What's your best advice to folks then, or conversely, what's that thing that you see people doing that just makes you shake your head?
Yeah. It's really interesting. I think that I'll give you one other kind of example just to illustrate things that used to make me shake my head that I think are finally starting to change a little bit. We do work with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies, and they looked at the clinical trial process, and they said, it takes somewhere between 10 to 12 years to take a drug from inception to FDA approval. And their belief was that a lot of this was due to the fact that they were spending too much time trying to get data stitched together across all these different activities that were involved in that process. And so you're thinking about things like experiment data, assay data, clinical trial data, real world evidence, right? So they're starting to put sensors into devices that they're deploying that are going through clinical trials so they can see behavior data. So the interesting part of this was that they used to, in some cases, wait until data would get published to the government as part of the approval process in order to pull that data back in a standardized way so they could even use it internally. Can you imagine having to go through the government in order to get clean access to your own data? So they stepped back and they said, we need to rethink this radically, and we need to also think about ways in which we can get the scientists, not data scientists, but literally the chemists, right, that are working in this area to be able to do, again, more of this on their own because they know what the codes mean. They understand how the data that they're getting from the real world evidence and from the clinical trials and the experiment data all should kind of harmonize together so they can do the analysis that they're doing. And their belief is, and what they're proving out right now, is that they can cut that time from inception to FDA approval more than in half. So you're talking about going from 10 to 12 years down to something that looks more like 5 years. And that's not only powerful for their business, but that's powerful for the health of the population, right? And so I think for us, seeing that cultural shift and seeing that change, that's the kind of stuff that I would go in and sort of shake my head at previously, thinking like, this is such a data-rich environment, and the impact of getting this right is so massive. Why can't we sort of rally organizations more fundamentally to see that they at their heart are really fundamentally data companies, and that this can be a massive competitive advantage if they can increase the agility in what they're doing. And I think now you're actually starting to see that play out, in places like pharmaceutical and financial services, in these data-intensive industries that often are very highly regulated. And in the past, those regulations and their inability to get the data harmonized, resulted in, frankly, just slowness, and resulted in a lot of frustration from the users that, were trying to get productive with data.
All right, guys, you heard it here. If you're running your business on the back of spreadsheets, you're probably falling behind. Hey, thanks for coming by.
It's great to see you. Thanks for the time.
All right, guys, back to you.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We got Kapil Rana, who is Vice President of Zero Trust Marketing and Identity Protection Evangelist for CrowdStrike. That's a mouthful right there. And we're talking about Microsoft Active Directory, and surprisingly, a lot of attacks are still aimed at this particular platform, and we're going to jump into that. Kapil, welcome to the show.
Thanks, I appreciate you having me there.
What's your sense of exactly what's going on here? I know you guys have done some research in this space. Is there still a lot of Microsoft Active Directory out there, or people targeting that? And what should we be worried about?
Yeah, so why we're talking about it is Microsoft Active Directory is still used by almost 99% of organizations out there, especially enterprise organizations, right? And even if they're trying to move away from, let's say, an on-premise version of Active Directory to the cloud, like, for example, Azure AD, that's a process, right? You can imagine how many applications, users, systems you have, and all the identities and how distributed they are. To move that to the cloud and having it run there and maybe protected there, that's a huge project in itself. So that's the reason we're still talking about it in terms of, why is everyone still using it? The other is, the world has changed, right? We have distributed applications, you have multi-cloud environments, you have now even privileged users like administrators working from home, which were never there before. So this complex IT infrastructure environment is created sort of another level of complexity, and therefore increase the attack surface for adversaries.
Do we take Microsoft AD for granted and we don't secure it enough? I know a lot of people manage their access through it, but it seems like maybe we're not thinking enough about securing the actual platform.
I think a lot of IT professionals have done an admirable job, very good job to try and defend Active Directory, right? but there's a couple of challenges. One is, as you alluded to, it's been around for a long time. Microsoft has created this as an infrastructure that's now embedded almost everywhere. The challenge is you sort of, do you rely on Microsoft that created the infrastructure to protect it? And that's been a challenge, right? We've seen a number of attacks where there's vulnerabilities in the infrastructure of Active Directory itself. So not even the attack of a credential, it's actually the attack of Active Directory domain controllers. So that's definitely one challenge is, you have to think about protecting Active Directory, but maybe not necessarily just from the identity provider itself. Maybe you should think about doing other things. And organizations, to be fair, have been trying to do that. But again, the things we talked about, which is the change of how IT applications are distributed and used. But the other is that modern attacks, adversaries have become much more sophisticated, right? So we have all this research we've pulled together over the last couple of years, how adversaries have changed. And so modern attacks today, almost 80% plus of all breaches involve some kind of identity-related technique or threat. And so that's a lot. And because you have sort of connected systems, you have, let's say, an endpoint, you have a mobile device, you have a workload, you have a container, all an attacker has to do is enter any one of those, whether it's through the endpoint, through like a malware attack, or through an identity compromise, and then migrate over to maybe where they really want to go. So the attack surface has become much larger. And then finally, when we talk about more specifically about digital transformation, we're talking about lots and lots of applications and containers and ephemeral workloads running. And if you're associating identity with them, suddenly you went from, let's say, 1,000 employees and maybe 80 accounts plus maybe a few hundred for applications to many, many thousand for every organization. Now it's not just, here is my Active Directory, here's some credentials. But what are those credentials associated with? Are they associated with applications or services? Are they users, privileged users? So just even knowing that has become much more complex. So I think, to be fair, organizations are trying to, but IT has changed. The IT provider or the identity provider like Microsoft has had challenges in trying to protect that infrastructure. And then finally, adversaries have gotten a lot smarter and quicker about attacking identity.
What exactly is the challenges with defending identity? Because we've had, for better or worse, username and passwords and various things like that for a while. And we're now talking about zero trust approaches to identity, and everybody nods their head, but it's not clear to me that everybody understands exactly what that means. What am I supposed to do? Because I don't think I can roll out of bed and go buy me some zero trust. So what's involved?
Sure, absolutely. So think of maybe protecting identity in a couple of approaches. One is infrastructure, right? Active Directory is a piece of software. It's infrastructure. It has components called domain controllers. And you have to protect that, because if an adversary takes over that infrastructure, they own all of the credentials. So, infrastructure attacks include things like, looking at, weak protocols, legacy protocols that you've enabled, looking at, access to those systems. Can I, for example, do a remote desktop protocol as a user to a domain controller, which again opens me up from an attack surface point of view as a privileged user. So you have sort of infrastructure protection. Then the next level is hygiene, right? Do your users, are they using compromised passwords? Because then at that point, they're on the dark web, and an adversary can just sort of walk in the front door that way. So you're looking at hygiene steps, whether it's looking at compromised passwords, things like, for example, we track things like, how many when a customer comes onto the Falcon platform, you can look at, say, how many of my passwords in the enterprise are stale accounts, meaning accounts have been provisioned that have some privileges, but haven't been used, let's say, in 30, 60, 90 days, right? And that's a high risk, because if it's just sitting there and no one's monitoring it, it could be taken over. So looking at things like that, hygiene. And then finally, you're looking at things like behavioral analytics, right? Real time. So it's not enough to just look and look theoretically and say, did I patch my vulnerabilities? Did I do all the good password hygiene? But what's actually being used right now? We know there's a fair number of attacks that take over legitimate credentials. I have a legitimate credential here at CrowdStrike, but did an adversary take over my credential and therefore the privileges it has access to? How do I know that, right? That's a lot of behavior. Like how is the credential being used? Is it deviate from an anomaly? How does it compare to other people in my peer group? So a lot of the artificial intelligence technologies and machine learning is used for that as well. So if you take a look at these three areas, that's how really holistically you can address a lot of these issues. And that's also what makes it a challenge if you're trying to address them piecemeal or relying on the identity provider alone.
Mm-hmm. How long a journey is this? Because what you just described is the classic people, process, and platforms kind of conversation. That seems to me something that's going to be measured in years, or can we accelerate this?
Well, if you ask me, as with my marketing hat, I can say it can be measured in 60 minutes or less. Because if you approach it from a platform perspective, right, you're able to look at what's happening in your endpoint, let's say your identity layer, your cloud layer, you can create a better attack story. So you know if adversaries entering anywhere in your organization, if they're trying to compromise in the early steps of, let's say, doing a lateral movement, which is very common, especially when you talk about identity attacks. So if you have that platform approach, it's much, much easier, right? So in the case of CrowdStrike, for example, you deploy a simple sensor everywhere, and that information comes into the system. It makes a decision. You can apply a policy, and you can detect and stop attacks that way. So it's very, very straightforward. And so, we were already seeing some benefits from it. But, it is a challenge for a lot of organizations. So, for example, some of the data, when you look at it, we look at things like, we mentioned stale passwords, for example, we compromised passwords, privileged users that have compromised passwords, which is really, really bad, right? But what's interesting, for example, and this is sort of internal research that we've been doing, and we'll be, more formally presenting that to the industry. But you have something like, if you look at different industries and different types of problems, banking, for example, has, interestingly enough, some of the biggest challenges, including things like high-risk passwords, right? Passwords that are more likely to be compromised because of the privileges associated with them. Or we see, for example, banking and retail, for example, have the highest number of compromised passwords that are in their system that are known already on the dark web to be compromised, right? The other thing we've been tracking is stale passwords. Again, if you look at what happened, let's say a couple of years ago with some of the SolarWinds, you had a application that most organizations had that had a privileged identity associated with it, right? A privileged account. But that privileged account was given a lot of scope, right? It could take over a lot. But that's essentially, an account that you don't monitor all the time. A human doesn't, right? And so, you want to be careful about that, careful about stale passwords. Almost a quarter of passwords, when we did internal research, were considered stale accounts, meaning accounts that increase the attack surface. We don't know if they're compromised. We don't know if they will be, but there's a higher chance of that happening because they're not being monitored for behavioral or something else. And so it's much easier when we approach it from a platform perspective to both, kind of deploy these solutions, detect and stop them, but more importantly, looking at an adversary, whether they're attacking from the cloud, moving maybe into the enterprise on-prem or endpoint, vice versa. I think that's really important. And that's really different today than it was before, which is looking at identity holistically in the cloud, at the endpoint, for the user, for the application, which wasn't really a concern even, like, say, 5 years ago.
How do we bridge the divide between the folks who run a platform like Microsoft AD and the cybersecurity folks? Because a lot of the IT folks who are managing things are in their day-to-day. They're just trying to keep things up and running as their primary mission, and they don't really have security at the forefront of their brain. So how do we bring these guys together?
Well, it's interesting. If we go back a few years ago, you're absolutely right. So the responsibility for Active Directory and security was not part of the CISO's function. Today, the majority of CISOs now own securing Active Directory because, again, identity is such a big portion of attacks. And so therefore now they own that. So today, CISOs have a lot more responsibility and influence in making sure Active Directory is secure. Now, for someone who's maintaining the credentials, their traditional identity access management, right? They can still do that unhindered, right? It depends on the way you deploy the security technology. Like, for example, in our case, you deploy a simple sensor that they may already be using, for example, on their endpoint. So they may already be using a sensor, let's say from CrowdStrike. And so all you're doing now is looking at different kinds of data. You're just turning on a different capability without having to install or do anything further. So IT's happy, right? The administrator's happy because you're not really adding any load or anything additionally to the system that they haven't seen before. And security's happy because now they have insight into one more layer, not just endpoint and cloud, but also identity.
Do you think the providers of the platforms should be doing more in regards to security? Because you kind of alluded to this earlier, but Microsoft's not the only one, but the platform provider has a vested interest in the features and the capabilities, and sometimes they don't like to talk about the security issues, but maybe security needs to be thought of more as a feature.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's not that these providers don't think about security, but it's challenging, right? If you're a company that has so many different products and so many different markets and so many areas, it's hard to be a specialist. CrowdStrike's sole mission, right, is to stop adversaries. And so that's all we think about. So the reason we can do it effectively is because we think about security and we learn about adversaries. I mean, that's the one unique value is we have human intelligence, right? All these analysts, but also all this data that we process, trillions of transactions on our cloud. And that gives us a better mechanism to detect threats faster. But when you're a larger company like Microsoft, right, they have to do so many things as a company, right? Security of their infrastructure is only a portion of it. Their answer really has been, don't run Active Directory on premise, move to Azure AD, right? Which makes sense, right? So you move all your credentials to the cloud, and then Microsoft can do a better job at helping you protect that. But again, that process, and for many organizations, that's nearly impossible. That's a challenge. The other is, what do you do with legacy systems? Systems that, you might say, okay, well, the answer is maybe multi-factor authentication. Well, how does that help when you have a legacy system that you can't protect with MFA, for example? How do you deal with contractor systems that you can't touch, or you're not allowed to do anything? So there, when you go outside the Microsoft ecosystem, then customers get stuck. So you really have to think about security, multi-cloud, multi-vendor, and think about a specialist that thinks about adversaries and all the different attacks, because that's what you really need. So to be fair, yes, the identity provider should do certain things, but you really need a security specialist to really protect that, like you do for everything else in your environment.
All right, folks, you heard it here, whether it's infrastructure like Microsoft AD, users, or for that matter, an application, you just can't trust anybody these days. Couple, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you for the time.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Greg Bach, who is Product Development Manager for Git Protect, which is owned and developed by Zalforis Software. And we're going to be talking about Jira and the need to protect Jira and back it up and recover and what's going on with all those issues. Greg, welcome to the show.
Hi, hello, Mike. Nice to see you again. And of course, I would like also to welcome all of you who's watching our today's video. And as you said before, today we are going to talk why and how properly protect your Jira instance.
So what exactly is the challenge? Because we've been backing up software forever and a day. So what makes Jira unique, and why do I maybe need a different approach than what people have been using to back up everything else that they have?
Yeah, especially I think each SaaS application requires different approach to backup because of different API, because of its limitations. But first of all, I think we need to change the way how we think about SaaS services. And this is what actually is happening on the market, because very often we can hear that if some kind of service is stored in cloud, then we don't need to worry about those data that are stored directly in the cloud because they are safe, they are secured, and obviously they are in cloud. But it's not true. And I think every SaaS service provides something called shared responsibility model, or on the other hand, known also as limited liability model. So they are not responsible for protecting your data. They are responsible for providing infrastructure, for providing service, its availability, but in general, not for your data. And I think that quite often users are not aware of that. So they don't know that their data are not protected, or maybe they are somehow protected, but without users' control. And in result, sometimes they may lose their data because of some accidents, some I don't know, third-party actors, some unwanted changes due to some human mistakes. There are a lot of different reasons we can lose data. So that's why it's so important to protect your Jira, even if it's running directly in the cloud. On the other hand, it became also more popular because Atlassian says that they are going to migrate most of their on-premise solutions to the cloud ones. So already there are a lot of users who are migrating from local Jira instance to the cloud one.
Where does the data get backed up to if it's a SaaS application? Because clearly, it's probably not going to be on the Atlassian service per se, because, well, that might be down. So the question is where do I put that data, and then how do I recover it?
Yeah, when you are thinking about any backup solution, first of all, you must be sure that this backup software allows you to follow 3-to-1 backup rule, which requires from you to have 3 different copies of your data in 2 different locations, and at least one outside of your company, or in terms of SaaS services, we can say that this one copy should be outside the service location. So it should go to some different infrastructure. And of course, it could be some local storages, like your even local disk resources on some NAS, for example. But also it could be any public cloud like AWS, Azure, and of course Git Protect also provides you this ability to store the data whenever you want. In general, we do support, of course, those public cloud storages as well, but we are also providing our own cloud storage from United States or EMEA, depends on our customer's region.
How quick does it take to, or how long does it take to recover the data? Because time is still money these days, and people are a lot more sensitive about recovery times than they used to be. So what exactly is involved in rehydrating the entire Atlassian Jira application?
So if you will take a look at the restore process, which Atlassian allows us to follow, which Atlassians make possible to be done, it has 2 steps. The first step we've got control over, and it's just data restore. So we just need to extract your data from backup, upload them to Atlassian servers, and this is the first step we've got the control over. The time is usually different of Jira size, but I think it's no longer than half hour in average with some big Jira instances. With those smaller ones, it's literally just a few minutes. And the second part of this process, we don't have control over. It's importing data directly to Jira. But in general, for instance, we meet usually with medium-sized customers. The whole restore process take up to, I believe, half hour in total. And in terms of Jira, it's pretty fast, because if we'll take a look at the outage they had in April last year, the last customers get the Jira instance recovered after more than 2 weeks. And we know even the one customer who was affected for so long time with no access to their Jira, because it takes them so long to restore the data, because obviously, of course, firstly, the bigger customers were handled, were restored, and after that, those smaller ones. So that's why it took so much time for them. So in case of such accident, half hour is really great and awesome time.
Do you think that cyber criminals are targeting Jira data because so much of an organization's development efforts revolve around that? So are they looking at that as a primary target? And, is that something to be concerned about?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have to, because nowadays Jira becomes a very powerful tool. It's used not only for IT and not only for DevOps companies, but I believe today there are way more companies, way more markets where Jira is used. It's a great solution for HR processes and other processes that took places in companies when you are planning something, when you need to make sure that some tasks are done properly, when you need to track any project, any process, not only in terms of IT, then Jira is really, really great tool. I'm not sure, but they are also providing some new product which can be used also to track your sales activities. So it can even become some kind of CRM in your future. So as you can see, there are a lot of valuable and important information that can be useful by some hackers, attackers, and others.
All right. Why doesn't Atlassian kind of address this issue, or why should we think about a third party for solving this problem?
It's a little bit tough question why they do not address this problem, but I believe in general each SaaS provider has some kind of backup under the hood, but it could be very expensive, very tough and difficult task to provide such backup with full control to each single user of such services. And probably, maybe, I guess, that's why they do not provide this kind of services. And on the other hand, they don't want to be, I think, they don't want to be responsible for the user's data. And it's way easier to give this responsibility to the end customer for the data. And as a backup producer, I know how big responsibility it is to have users' data in place, to keep them secure and always available whenever users need them.
Mm-hmm. Who's ultimately making this decision? Is it the owners of the Jira application, or is there somebody else in IT that they think is doing this on their behalf? And is there somebody who's in charge of data protection who's supposed to be thinking about all this?
Usually it depends on the size of the company, because with those smaller companies where there are no roles dedicated for IT security, usually decision is made by Jira admin. So he finds out, for example, that Jira provides some manual backup options that you can every 2 days make full backup of your Jira. And if he will see how much data are changed or added daily to Jira, then manual backup made every day is not enough for such IT admin. Moreover, it's worth to be added that statistics says that manual backups are usually half-year old. So such old backups are useless because we are just humans. We can forget about making some manual tasks. And that's why it's so important to automate your backup, to make it as frequent as you need, as important changes are made. On the other hand, in those bigger companies with dedicated security team, or at least with I don't know, CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, and persons like this, they make decisions to, quite often the decision is made even by CTO. So by general decision makers responsible for the data security in company.
And who tests all this? Because in my experience, at least, a lot of the times the files are corrupted when you go to recover them. They might even be loaded up with encrypted malware, and you're not going to be able to get them. So who checks on whether or not we can actually recover the time when we need it versus sometimes, when we don't look, we get surprised?
Yeah. So, the first of all, in case of Git Protect, our software takes the best care about your data. So we are making sure that all checksums and every data on the storage is safe, secure, and properly written there. Of course, we are using immutable storages. So once data are written to the storage, they cannot be changed and modified. So thanks to it, we can be sure that they won't be affected by any kind of malware. But in terms of tests, it's pretty tough to make it automatically because Jira is service hosted directly in the cloud. And whenever we want to recover Jira, we have to do it to some new or existing instance. So you have to own some additional instance. But I think in near future, we will provide such feature to Git Protect as well, because it's worth to be mentioned that in Git Protect, as the end user, you can always test your Jira restore with no additional fees. Because we allows you to restore the data, your Jira instance, with no users at all. And Jira licensing model is based on number of users you have in your Jira. So if you will restore your entire Jira, but with no users, then you can be sure that all data are there, that they are recoverable. How long does it take? And you won't be charged by Atlassian for such instance of the Jira. And I hope in the near future, we'll also provide such feature automated in Git Protect.
All right, folks, you heard it here. If your DevOps world revolves around Jira, better to be safe than sorry. Greg, thanks for being on the show.
And thank you too.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had some amazing interviews with industry professionals to give you the latest in the tech world. And alongside our episode of Techstrong Women, we had plenty of great content today. We'll be back again on Monday, so we hope to see you then. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. As always, stay strong. Techstrong.